Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We are live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. It's currently 7 a.m. in New York and 2 p.m. here in Israel. I'm Devo Klein, and here is your roundup of all of the latest developments coming out of the region. The region currently sits on edge as the United States and the Islamic regime in Iran edge closer every day to a direct military confrontation. Here in Israel, the home front is preparing for a potential Iranian attack as European sources tell Reuters that American intervention is imminent. Preparations for a strike are visible on the ground, with the United States already beginning to withdraw personnel from key bases in the region, despite recent comments by President Trump that he was told that the killings of protesters had stopped. Take a listen.
Who told you that the killings had stopped there? And if it's the Iranian regime?
We have been informed by very important sources on the other side, and they've said the killing has stopped and the executions won't take place. There was supposed to be a lot of executions today, and that the executions won't take place. And we're going to find out. I mean, I'll find out after this. You'll find out. But we've been told on good authority, and I hope it's true. Who knows, right? Who knows? Crazy world.
Trump has further cautioned, quote, "We'll see what it all means," but new reports are now suggesting that Trump is indeed hesitant to strike, as his closest advisors have warned that a strike on the Islamic Republic would certainly weaken the regime, but not dismantle or topple it completely. Meanwhile, in the last hour, Trump tweeted on X a quote from Fox News that reads, quote, "Iranian protesters will no longer be sentenced to death after President Trump's warnings." He added that hopefully it will continue. And so all eyes are now on President Trump, with diplomacy between Washington and Tehran being completely cut off, leaving only military action as an option to halt the regime's brutal crackdown on Iranian protesters. And joining me now to discuss all of the latest developments with the Islamic regime in Iran and the American response is Ambassador Danny Ayalon, chairman of Silver Road Capital Group. Ambassador Ayalon, always a pleasure to have you on the show with us.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Devo.
So speculation of a strike was incredibly high yesterday. The Home Front Command issued warnings to Israelis to remain on high alert. U.S. bases in the area have been evacuated and readiness was up. But today brings a completely different feeling with the tweet from Trump that we just read. And President Trump himself, well, he seems to be keeping his cards pretty close to his chest regarding the actual information that is known. Ambassador, what is your current analysis of the filming of this show? Is a strike on its way or not?
I hope so, because, we have crossed the point of no return in terms of credibility of the United States, of the president himself, but most importantly of the trust and confidence that the people of Iran put in the president. And they still remember how they were stung by President Obama in 2009. At that time, nobody expected him to do anything because he said it's an internal situation in Iran. We are not going to be involved. Of course, when 2 years later, in 2011, insurgencies started in Cairo and in Egypt, he did intervene. So it was probably a matter of ideology, unfortunately. But now, in this situation, if Trump doesn't deliver, I'm afraid that not only this will quench the desire, and the people of Iran, will lose hope for many, many years. Now it's a great time of opportunity to get rid of this ruthless, brutal authoritarian regime. And if we collectively, as the Western democratic countries, if we do not do it now, then it's going to be a fatal, critical mistake that will bear with us for generations.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you say "we" when you're discussing this imminent strike, because if the United States, should decide to strike the Islamic regime in Iran, they will likely need Israeli assistance. So a joint operation is not completely off the table. How coordinated are Jerusalem and Washington at this point?
Well, very much so. We saw it during the 12 days war with Iran, and it bore fruits which was beyond imagination. And we saw it in other, coordination vis-a-vis Gaza and Syria, and of course Lebanon. So coordination is very good. Whether kinetically Israel needs to be part of it, I'm not sure. The U.S. can do it quite well without Israel's direct involvement. But of course, all the possibilities are on the table.
And, when you say all possibilities, it's obviously also involving Israel's involvement with the strike. But in your opinion, is a military confrontation, the right way to go right now? Because we've also seen other attempts of more, symbolic strikes. For example, a cybersecurity attack. Trump, as we know, he said recently that he would impose a 25% tariff on any businesses that cooperate with Iran. But this seems pretty inadequate when it comes to achieving lasting change in Iran. So what's your take on all that?
Well, I'm afraid that we are way beyond and past the sanctions, which we know. I mean, they were effective enough, but not enough. And this is the time to do it. And it has to be an operation not only symbolic, but an operation that will help the people of Iran to get rid of their oppressors. And just a symbolic attack will not do. Cyber and other issues, it's short-lived. So in order to really get rid of this regime, which actually endangers not just Israel, but the entire region, the entire Middle East and beyond, this is the time. And if we miss this opportunity, as I mentioned, Devo, then I think that it will, this mistake will loom over very large on the stability of the Middle East and the world itself for many years.
How do you compare Trump's threats with the Islamic regime and Trump's actions with Maduro in Venezuela? I mean, the images projected from that operation in Venezuela are of strength and following through on threats, but there is more caution taken with the regime in Iran. So in your opinion, is this strictly geographic? I mean, Venezuela technically is much closer for the United States to quickly go in and out. Iran is much farther away. Or do you maybe think that there are other considerations we're likely not seeing?
Well, size. It's not just a matter of distance, but it's size. Iran is 10 times larger than Venezuela, not just in territory, but 91 million. And also the regime there is unfortunately entrenched very deeply, and it's a ruthless regime. So it has to be very well carefully planned an operation like that. But also we have known from previous conduct of Trump that he is a master of deception, and that also could be part of the game. And we'll have to wait and see.
Actually, interesting that you mention deception, because when it comes to the Islamic regime, it seems as though they're really lying through their teeth. They are underreporting the death toll. They're saying, they will turn the internet back on, and they have not done so yet. So when they say that the protests are under control today and that things are calming down, can we really trust them when they tell President Trump that there will be no executions and there will be no killings of protesters?
Not at all. We cannot trust them. They lie, as you mentioned, through their teeth, and not just now, but for the last 40 some years. And when deception is legitimate as war tactics, and this is what Trump may use or may not. But we cannot, of course, compare this to what Iran is doing. And we know they have caught more than once red-handed in terms of their breaching of all their commitments before.
So, just to recap and sort of enter the wrap-up for today, what do you think could be the regional implications of this unrest, of all of these developments? As we know, the Islamic Republic are the backers of all of the regional proxies. We even have a statement from the Houthis in Yemen saying that, should Israel and Iran open a front, they will also join the efforts. So what do you foresee changing?
Well, the fall of the Ayatollahs will be, I would say, the last straw and the most crucial step in order to really abolish this axis of evil. Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria, Assad, they have all been diminished. Houthis in Yemen as well. We have to remember, Iran's fingers are everywhere. Wherever there is a problem and violence, it's Iran, whether it's in Sudan or Libya, not only Lebanon and Gaza. So by taking the Ayatollahs out, I think we are really presenting to the region a new era of not just stability and peace, but also of prosperity and cooperation.
Oh, that's a great message to actually wrap up our interview for today, Ambassador Daniello. And I want to thank you so much, as always, for coming on the show, giving us your analysis and your insights. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And meanwhile, here in Israel, while the home front prepares for regional escalation, a mass rally in support of the people of Iran was held in Holon. Just over 100 Israelis gathered in the city with the largest Persian community in Israel, waving flags and chanting "Long live the Shah" in support of exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. The show of support comes as the people of Iran enter their 5th day with no internet in a mass blackout that regime officials said would end, and reports of bodies of murdered protesters being kept in fruit and vegetable fridges as the morgues have run out of room. The rally emphasizes that Israel will always stand with the people of Iran. And in other news, yesterday's announcement by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff changed the game in Gaza, with the United States formally declaring the commencement of Phase 2 in President Trump's plan for Gaza. Witkoff said Phase 2 will establish a transitional Palestinian technocratic administration in Gaza, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, or NCAG, tasked with running the day-to-day civil affairs in the Strip. According to Witkoff, the new phase also marks the beginning of full demilitarization and reconstruction, with a primary focus on the disarmament of all unauthorized armed groups. This announcement is being praised by Qatari and Egyptian mediators, but also by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who said the Trump administration is creating new pathways toward peace. All of this unfolds as Ran Gvili, the final Israeli hostage, enters his 832nd day of captivity. Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with the family of Gvili, ensuring that the return of his body is still the top priority of his government, emphasizing that the move to Phase 2 will not affect the ongoing searches for Gvili's body and the efforts to bring him home. And as the United States moves forward with Phase 2 and establishing the NCAG, Israeli security officials are closely watching the new Palestinian-backed governing body set to replace Hamas in Gaza. The committee is set to advance the war goals Israel has already established along with the United States, which include replacing Hamas rule and creating the conditions for demilitarization, stability, and eventual reconstruction. Israel has claimed the names of the NCAG are, quote, familiar to the state of Israel, with each having backgrounds of working with Israeli and international bodies. Heading the committee will be Ali Shath, a former PA deputy minister and senior civil servant, described by Israeli security officials as a moderate Fatah figure who has avoided militant politics thus far. It's important to note that no authority will be exercised inside Gaza until structures, staffing, and security coordination mechanisms are defined and well in place. This comes as Hamas, despite public claims it will step aside, is demanding that the administrative bodies is established after seizing power in 2007 continue operating. That demand has been rejected by the United States mediators and Israel. Officials say reconstruction will be strictly conditioned on security performance, with an initial pilot project expected in Rafah under close Israeli oversight. And joining me now to break all of this down is Itamar Marcus of Palestinian Media Watch. Itamar, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
So help us make sense of all of this, because Israel seemed pretty adamant to not have the Palestinian Authority involved in post-war Gaza, but that doesn't add up with with Israel's actions when it comes to this national committee, which is Palestinian-backed. I mean, are we missing something here, or is Israel, when it comes to disarming Hamas, just simply out of options?
Well, there are two separate issues here. There's the issue of disarming Hamas, and there's also the issue of which other Palestinian force is going to take over and be the security force there. And the two separate issues. Now, the disarming of Hamas would have been much easier before the ceasefire because Hamas was totally falling apart, and Israel, in a very short period of time, could probably have completely disarmed them. The United States wanted a ceasefire then, and we got all of our hostages, all of our live hostages, and almost all of the dead hostages back. So that was a valuable thing that was done. But what it enabled Hamas to rebuild, and they've recruited thousands of more people. Hamas has endless amounts of money in there now because of the taxes they take on all the food supplies that come in. And they're the only ones who can pay a proper salary. So they have thousands of people who they have bought to join their security forces, and they're very strong right now. So right now, Hamas rules again, both militarily and over the civilians in the areas that are under its control. So that's the first thing. So that the first condition, which is removal of Hamas from power, has not happened. Now, the second side is who's going to take over and replace Hamas. And here it gets even more complicated because the person who's being suggested right now, or is the name of who's been there, is a guy named Sami Nassman. He's a former Palestinian Authority security officer, senior officer. And Palestinian Media Watch has reported how totally involved the Palestinian Authority security services have been in terror. In other words, the Palestinian Authority security services in Judea and Samaria, who are supposed to fight terror, hundreds of them have been arrested for terror. And worse than that, the Palestinian Authority and Fatah leaders have been praising them. And I'll give you just a recent example, which is incredibly shocking. Abbas Zaki is a senior Palestinian Authority figure. And he was interviewed just a week ago on television. And he was asked, is it true that Fatah isn't involved in the armed conflict anymore? And he completely rejected it. And he said, just look at the prisons before October 7th. They were filled with Fatah people. Look at the graves in the cemeteries filled with Fatah people. And then he said, and of course, look how many of these were from the Palestinian Authority security services. So the PA is bragging about the fact that the security services were involved in terror. And these are the people that the West right now is thinking about bringing into Gaza. If that would happen, we'd be replacing one terror organization with another terror organization, and we'll end up in the same situation that we had before October 7th.
Interesting. And, as of this broadcast right now, we've actually gotten updated reports that a Hamas official told Reuters that they would be willing to hand over power to this national committee. I mean, what's your assessment? Can we take their words seriously, or do we need to practice a little bit more caution when it comes to Hamas?
It's absolutely not believable. There is nothing to believe about Hamas ever, or the Palestinian Authority for that matter, but certainly not Hamas when it comes to giving up their arms. Hamas knows that giving up their arms means the end of Hamas. That is what gives them power, so that they would never do it, and they might hide it. They'll put it under their pillows. They'll put them under the ground. But the arms are going to be there for future use. And what Hamas would like to see right now, and we have to understand, Hamas would love to see a Palestinian technocratic government, or even a Palestinian Authority government, come back into Gaza, rebuild Gaza, and have no foreign influences. And then the same way they did in 2006, have a little revolution and start all over again with Hamas in power. That's what they'd like. They'd like everyone else to do the dirty work of rebuilding Gaza. And then when it's all in place, they'll bring their military in and take it over again.
Interesting. So based on what you're saying, really, that what you're really saying is that Hamas would be willing to let the Palestinian Authority-backed committee come in, but what about the people of of Gaza? Because I mean, Hamas isn't just popular in Gaza; they're also more popular in Judea and Samaria than the PA. So how would the people of Gaza be reacting to it? As you mentioned earlier, Hamas are paying their salaries. So how would that unfold?
Yeah, well, let's go and understand the even more fundamental problem. One of the conditions of the international community for on the Palestinian Authority is they're demanding that there be elections, and Abbas has guaranteed that within 2 years there's going to be elections. Now, the irony is that there is no doubt that Hamas will win the elections. Now, they've said that Hamas won't run, but just remember, in the elections in 2005, Hamas did not run under the name of Hamas. They had a different name because even then Hamas was not allowed to run. But yet all the officials from Hamas that we know ran on that list. And that's what will happen now. Hamas will run the elections under a different name. Hamas will definitely be victorious, and then Hamas will take over again as they did the last time. And in fact, they would probably win the presidential election as well, so that all these infrastructures in place would then be handed directly over to Hamas, no matter where the PA is ruling, Judea and Samaria. If it's the same as today, if it's less, if it's more, it would all be handed over to Hamas. So the myth that there will be governance anywhere without Hamas is just literally self-deception by the international community. We hear all the international leaders saying, oh, there's going to be a reformed Palestinian Authority, and we're going to have elections, and Hamas isn't going to have a part. Of course, it's a joke. They just don't care about reality. They like to make simple statements. They like simple solutions, even though they're a big mistake. And I say the same thing about the person who's now running the Palestinian Authority security services. Simple solution. He's had a military experience. Let him run the security services in Gaza. He's not officially a member of the security services now, but he was a major general in the Palestinian Authority security services in the past. It's not finding the right solution. It's finding a simple solution, appointing a terrorist who claims he's no longer a terrorist. But long term, everyone's going to pay, and especially Israel's going to pay for this kind of shortcut that the international community is taking.
Mm-hmm. And I want to touch on some of the things that you mentioned, but before that, I want to address a report that last night the IDF demolished a home in Hebron belonging to the terrorist who murdered Aaron Cohen, Zichrono Livracha, in Kiryat Arba. Now, the terrorist himself was neutralized on the scene of the attack. He is dead, but these demolitions are likely tied to the terrorist family, who should be receiving the financial reward from the PA for committing this act of terror and violence, or as we call the policy, pay for slay. Itamar, are these our partners in dismantling Hamas? Do we have anyone to trust in this region right now?
The Palestinian Authority should never be thought of for one moment as a partner in peace. Just have to point out, for example, that when under international pressure, when Mahmoud Abbas claimed that he would stop the pay for slay program, the paying of salaries, literally 2 weeks later, he appeared on television and he said, don't worry, we're not going to stop paying them. And the reason was most important. He said, they are more honored than all of us. They are the most honored. Mahmoud Abbas is the top of the terror structure in the Palestinian Authority. And I'll give you another example directly from Abbas's mouth. A couple of years ago, Israel released a terrorist who had been in prison for murder, Karim Yunus. He was released after 40 years instead of his life sentence because Shimon Peres earlier had cut his sentence down. When he got out of prison, this is a murderer. Mahmoud Abbas called him up. He had it filmed, and he told him, "You are a role model." He gave him a long speech about he's a role model for all Palestinians. Well, when Mahmoud Abbas says that a murderer is a role model, you know exactly where the Palestinian Authority stands, and you understand why the Palestinian Authority should really be defined as a terror entity. Even now, when the Palestinian Authority, when Israel gave up in order to get our hostages. We gave up over 1,000 terrorists, and the worst of them, we wouldn't send neither to Judea and Samaria nor to Gaza. We demanded they be expelled, and they landed in Egypt. The day after they landed in Egypt, Mahmoud Abbas sent an emissary. And then he had this public speech where he said, which was filmed and broadcast on Palestinian TV, where he said, "I have a message to you heroes from Mahmoud Abbas. You are the pride, etc., etc." And he honored them. So The leader of the Palestinian Authority continues to say that terrorist murderers, even the worst ones, are heroes to be honored. Anyone who has any belief in the Palestinian Authority as a potential peace partner, it's a farce because they haven't been and they're not planning to be.
And they will likely never be. I can agree with that assessment of yours. And I think that you actually painted a very clear picture of what the Palestinian Authority is. But in terms of Israel, it seems like we kind of have to choose between the lesser of two evils, Hamas, the Palestinian Authority. There's really no one to speak to. And when it comes to disarming Hamas, it seems like Israel's hands are tied, like there simply are no other options. So what do you think all this means for Israeli security long term? Do you foresee Israel ever properly securing its border in the south, or will, no matter what happens, Hamas will find its way to infiltrate, take over, and go right back to where it started?
Well, let's look at what happened in Judea and Samaria as a model. Israel once upon a time pulled out completely from the cities of Judea and Samaria, and those cities all, and under the Palestinian Authority, those cities turned into terror cities where they planned not just Hamas, but the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades of Fatah under Yasser Arafat and also under Mahmoud Abbas. Terror was planned there. And the only reason that we have a drop in terror from Judea and Samaria right now is because the Israeli army went back into the cities. And that has to be something and that really should be the model for Gaza as well. The only way Gaza will remain terror-free is if the Israeli army prevents it from being terror-free. And exactly what mechanism or how the arrangements will be made for Israel to prevent terror, that has to be determined. But to believe that we can trust that the Palestinians, knowing the record that they have, that they're going to do anything to fight terror, the moment they get there, they will create a perception of fighting terror with their left hand, and with their right hand, they'll be building up a terror infrastructure, just like Yasser Arafat did, just like Mahmoud Abbas did, and we should learn from those mistakes. Judea and Samaria is safe now because we are back in the cities. Let's not leave those cities in Gaza to be rebuilt into terror infrastructures.
That's interesting that you're drawing this comparison. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the only way to properly secure Israel's border is for the IDF to go in and just get the job done?
Absolutely. We can't. First of all, no one else wants to go in. They talked about creating a foreign military force of Arab states. There's no one who wants to go in to fight Hamas now because they know Hamas is not going to willingly put down their weapons. So the only one who could possibly do it will be Israel. And it's unfortunate that we're going to have to fight there again. It's tragic that we're going to have to fight there again. But we're the only ones who are going to be able to get rid of the arms from Hamas. The only bright side is that the fighting is going to be much easier now because we don't have hostages there who we have to be concerned about. So that we'll have, the army should hopefully, if we do have to go back into Gaza, I'm hoping that the political administration and the army leadership will give the soldiers the green light to do whatever has to be done from a distance. We're talking about massive bombings of the terror infrastructures, not to endanger our soldiers, to bring Hamas to their knees without endangering our soldiers as much as is possible. And then we have to unfortunately hold on to these places because we've learned since the first day of the Oslo Accords, when we left in 1994, every area that Israel gives up turns into a terror infrastructure. And by the way, I'll point out something else. It's not just what they do it because they say it. If you look at the Palestinian education that we've been reporting on for years, including till today, they don't stop talking about the goal being destruction of Israel. There is no sense of talking about a two-state solution in the internal Palestinian world, not in the formal education, not in the informal education. Palestinian Media Watch a few months ago, we released videos of school assemblies in the Palestinian Authority, school assemblies where they were celebrating the October 7th. We went through the various activities that happened in the weeks after October 7th.
Itamar, I'm so sorry, but we really do have to wrap up because we're almost out of time. They're going to cut us off. But thank you so much for wrapping that up so nicely and painting the picture. But we are out of time. I'm so sorry. Thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, very well. Thank you for inviting me.
And I want to thank our viewers also for joining us today on ILTV on the Hour. Scan the QR code to get more information. I'm Diva Klein, and thanks for watching.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Khaled Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. As anti-regime demonstrations intensify across Iran, security forces gunned down thousands of protesters in the streets. Iranian officials accuse the U.S. and Israel of fueling the unrest and say they are prepared for war if it goes on. President Trump urges Iranians to continue protesting and says help is on the way without specifying what kind of action the U.S. will be taking. The IDF says it is preparing for the possibility Iran will strike Israel in retaliation for any U.S. attack. The Trump administration advances to phase 2 of its Gaza peace plan, including the creation of a Palestinian technocratic administration overseen by a peace council comprised of global figures. This as Hamas refuses to disarm, and the IDF eliminates 6 terrorists who attempted to infiltrate the Rafah area in what it calls a serious violation of the ceasefire agreement. An IDF airstrike eliminates a terrorist engaged in rebuilding the military infrastructure of Hezbollah in the Beit Jabil area of Lebanon. This after Israel refutes claims by the Lebanese government that it has disarmed Hezbollah forces south of the Litani River as per the ceasefire agreement. And now our big story. The protests in Iran are intensifying, and so is the regime's brutal crackdown of the unrest. Iran has confirmed over 2,000 shot dead by security forces, though some opposition figures put the number of fatalities much higher. President Trump has encouraged the protests to continue and vowed to hit Iran hard if the killings did also, a warning the regime has blatantly defied. So what will the U.S. do now? And if it does strike, how will the Ayatollahs respond? Here's what Trump had to say.
U.S. airstrikes comes to that. Will protect, will have the result of protecting the protesters.
Well, you never know, do you? You never know.
Do you think it's...
So far, my track record's been excellent, but you never know.
Do you think it's going to be something kinetic like that, or more like cyber? Or
well, I can't tell you that. I know exactly what it would be. We have to make a decision.
Sir,
but I can't be. Obviously, I can't be telling you.
And joining us in the studio for more is Dr. Eric Mandel, founder and director of MEPIN, the Middle East Political and Information Network. And from the U.S., Camilla Intek-Habafard, editor-in-chief of the Independent Persian. Thank you for joining us. Eric, I want to start with you. We just heard President Trump saying help is on the way, not committing himself to what specific type. There is question of whether the U.S. may strike Iran even in the coming days. Reports just in the last a few moments that the Al Udeid base in Qatar, the U.S. has told some personnel to evacuate certain parts of that, maybe concerned about Iranian retaliation. What do you think the president is going to decide on at this time?
So I think the advice that he's getting is, will this stabilize or destabilize the region for American business interests and those partners like Qatar and Saudi Arabia who are whispering in his ear, maybe not to act so quickly. The president also wants victories. And the president, you remember, in the 12-day war, he waited a week before he joined in, before he knew that it would be effective and American planes wouldn't be shot down because Israel had done a lot of the hard work. So what can America do? First, it could do covert actions. Covert actions would be like cyber attacks against the command structure, against state media to shut it down. They could do economic. They could seize tankers, part of the shadow fleet. They could do secondary sanctions. That means anybody who trades with Iran, and that would affect countries that are American, quote, friends, like Turkey and UAE. And then it gets to the kinetic actions. The kinetic actions would be to actually target the IRGC, 150,000, and then you're talking about the Baji paramilitary. There could be up to 1 million of them. But the president has said that he wants the protesters to take over institutions, and his red lines, though, keep changing. And now we hear that there's anywhere between 2,500 and maybe 20,000 that are dead. Who knows how many more have been killed. But that red line's changing. He's now talking about if they start hanging them. I'm not exactly sure where that came from. So I think things are a little up in the air. But the president, if you remember, sent B-2s in the wrong direction to fool people when he was going to strike.
Right.
So maybe he will be a little clandestine in what he's doing here. But my inclination is, when you go day to day, I still think he's going to do something. And I think if he's going to do it, I think it would be something of significance. Otherwise, the Iranian protesters are counting on him to do this. And we don't want this to be 2009, the Green Revolution, where President Obama chose appeasement of the Ayatollah for a nuclear deal. Here, President Trump does not want to follow that legacy.
Right. And Camille, what do the Iranian protesters in the streets want from the U.S., from President Trump? There is some discussion about whether a U.S. attack on Iran could, how much it would actually help, for example, the uprising there. And if not that, what actions would be effective?
Hello to everyone, and good afternoon to the viewers. What Iranians are asking for is very bold. They are asking President Trump to eliminate Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader. The other versions of the issues maybe President Trump is facing for is not about the way and the plan he has to hit the regime hard, which they stop to killing and oppressing the protesters, or regime changes, which it is on the table maybe. It's mainly is Iranian neighbors. We had lots of open messages saw yesterday on Twitter from Qatar to Oman has been asking President Trump to not attack Iran because the retaliation, it can be hard on their neighboring countries. I don't want to specific name anyone in the Persian Gulf, but all of them perhaps these days are at the front line of the regime retaliation. Thinking of the regional allies of the U.S. in the region, I believe it is the most major consideration and concern for President Trump and his security advisors to has been holding this attack or goal-oriented kind of the attack to Tehran. But unfortunately, as we are speaking now, the head of the judiciary threatening to immediately retaliate and execute and harsh punishment for the demonstrators to be carried on. And as much as this help has been delayed, I have fears for more lives has been taken or massive execution will happen in the presence, in the lack of the internet connection and a good communication inside Iran. Still, the real number of these people hasn't been disclosed, but based on the information I have receiving from Iran and also knowing what type of the retaliation the regime usually taking to shatter the demonstrations, we could say is more than 1,000 people already killed, if we not including those people who are seriously injured or might be in silent of the Western countries to be executed inside of the prison. That was the most serious demonstrations and uprising in Iran since the Islamic Republic, and that was the most threatening to topple the regime since in just shorter than 2 weeks. We can see how urgently Iranian needs help and how urgently the regime needs to oppress the people in order to secure its spot. What kind of the help and what type of the assistance President Trump is thinking to bring that to Iranians still is mystery, but I hope it doesn't come too late to can save some lives in Iran.
Right, certainly not. Eric, let me ask you, certainly one country in the region that does want to see the U.S. act is Israel, though there is a question of timing. There are some in Israel that say maybe it should be delayed a little bit to a point where it'll really impact on the regime. And then there's a question of if the U.S. attacks Iran, we could expect Iran to attack Israel. How should Israel respond? Because the regime would like to certainly to somehow transform this into a battle against Israel rather than against the Iranian people.
Absolutely. So the question is, and this would have to be coordinated with the United States. So say there is an American attack. The first targets could be American bases, Al-Uaid, or places in Iraq or Syria where there are American assets. Remember, there are no American carrier groups now, which makes attacks different than in the past. So what should Israel do? Israel needs to prepare if they're struck. But then how does Israel respond? Does Israel want to destroy the economy, hit Bandar Abbas, where the container port is, hit Karg Island, knock out 3/4 of their exporting? Because if there really is regime change here, then you want the people to have an economy afterwards. But that would definitely cripple the regime going forward. You remember the IRGC basically owns the economy. And they will do anything, they and the Ayatollah, to stay in power. And to stay in power, they are playing by the playbook that if you do enough killing and repression, then we understand in the West that you're not going to have a revolution, which is what is needed to be here. What you need, at least according to Western ears, is defections. Now, defections in IRGC, Abaji, hard. But could you have defections in the Army? Army is different than the IRGC. And if you had even one or two, that could change everything. And so could the United States create something? Now, granted, we have a CIA. We have human assets that are there. That would be, I think, a game changer. But the tipping point is always when the people in the streets stop fearing the security apparatus. And that hourglass is decreasing. And that's why we Americans need to act and not leave these people hung to dry.
Well, let's ask somebody with good contacts in Iran. Committee, those two questions. One, how close is it to the tipping point when you will really see a critical mass of Iranians out on the street, despite the fact that, as you both say, they're risking their lives? And two, is there a possibility of defections within at least the military apparatus, which is, it seems like you would need that, because unlike the situation in Syria, the IRGC is fiercely loyal to the Ayatollahs and is still a formidable force.
There is a little gap here I should describe about the regime and the people, widely open. Because, yes, the regime is so ideologic, the regime is so brutal, but the economy, it's horrible. The real value is soaring down against of the international currencies. Yes, all of them are here to say Iranians are so fed up. But the other side of this story is a regime which still have so much interest in the region, and it has its own supporters too. Maybe one of the reasons still is holding President Trump back and still makes the regime so much counting on them is those militia. Still there are some militias in Syria, still there are some militias in Iraq, and still in Lebanon, this Yemen. All these people can be a more kind of the global threat at this stage. However, Iranian doesn't care. What would happen if those other militias wants to make some issues for the countries which they are hosting them? But I'm not very much agree if we said Iranian military is very much different than the IRGC, which the other dear guest at the studio mentioned. Yes, we try to embarrass them when we were saying stay with Iranian people. You are not the revolutionary guard. You are not devoted to the supreme leader. But Khalif, it's almost 47 years past since revolution, and the national army so much changed since. Ayatollah Khomeini made a massive execution at the beginning of the revolution to make sure all of these patriotic members of the army has been killed, and the new generations has been grown in the way the supreme leader is wishing for. They are all brainwashed. We had the statement from the national army a few days ago were saying he would stood with the regime and they would protecting the entities of the people against of these agitators. They called the demonstrators, riots, agitator, and anything you name it. Here we shouldn't count so much on the national army. Iranian people were counting on themselves and foreign help. That's why these days they were so much seeking and asking for President Trump to come and assist them. Speaking of striking some capacities of Iranian, making drones maybe on the table, maybe some missiles also, it's another target for President Trump. At this point, if there would be an escalation between Iran and the US, I believe that not too early they would conducting attack on Israel, because now they were speaking about American bases, American entities, American personnel, and none of them are inside Israel, as what I understand. They are mainly talking about regional countries, the countries which have a very good growing economy, and any confrontation and escalation can be also damage their interest, and not only American interest, the regional interest. Maybe more specific kind of the target would be more preferred than Iranian quickly can seize the opportunities and with the help of others overthrow the regime. And here we have a fantastic opposition leader, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, which he is the most threatening danger and obvious danger to the Islamic Republic. And the one Iranian were so much counting on his leadership. We shouldn't forget his role, which play a very crucial role here at this uprising.
All right. Now, Iranian officials are not surprisingly blaming the U.S. and Israel, specifically the Mossad, is viewing the protests, and say while they are ready to negotiate with the U.S., they are ready for war if attacked. Here's one response.
ما خواهان جنگ نیستیم، ولی برای جنگ آمادگی کامل داریم. در این حال همونطور که بارها گفتم ما برای مذاکره هم آمادگی داریم.
Eric, as we saw with Venezuela, President Trump sometimes likes to strike or use the threat of the strike and then go to talks. Any possibility, even though at this point he's cut off contact with Iranian officials, he may still go to that playbook?
Right. I think if he goes to that playbook, and there are definitely people in the administration counseling that, I think that will be an abandonment of the Iranian people. And I think that they will miss a great opportunity, a generational opportunity to change the regime. By the way, I'm very aware that a regime collapse does not necessarily mean a good regime change. The most likely group that would take over is an organized group. And who's organized? The IRGC, even if it breaks down, they're the most likely. You think of the Arab Spring back in 2011, with liberals were there, and when they tried to overthrow Mubarak, and they did, who took over? It was a Muslim Brotherhood. They were the most organized. So who is the most organized here? As far as the Crown Prince goes, can he be a transitional figure like King Juan Carlos in Spain, where you had a situation after the authoritarian Franco, you can switch over? And do enough people remember? Right now, the people who live in Iran, the vast majority weren't even alive when the Shah was there. So there's a nostalgia for what's there, and things very often seem better than they actually were. But he is the only leader. But I've been working with Iranian dissidents through a whole spectrum, and there's a mixture. The external groups are not solidified together, although for the first time it does seem the Crown Prince is the one. But again, President Trump, at least as of this moment, has not invited him in. Supposedly was going to be invited, the Crown Prince was going to be invited into the White House, but to meet with Rubio and the Secretary of War. So they haven't given him the full legitimacy. And again, that's because the administration President Trump, I should say, hasn't decided what to do, and the victory is not guaranteed.
Right, and so let me go to Camille on that point, because what's defeated previous uprisings is that lack of an organized opposition centered perhaps on certainly one leadership figure. Is the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, is that in place now? Or could we just see chaos? Could we see Iran disintegrate if this current regime falls?
No, if the regime falls, I cannot see any chaotic situation that happen inside Iran. Yes, there are lots of institutions try to making fears and telling Iranians any uprising or any chaotic situation may turn to a huge violence, and the sects and different groups comes to fight each other in Tehran. And but I guess this event has been made to by the regime. This is their narratives to hold the power as long as is possible. Seeing the scene today, how all Iranians under one flag, the flag of Lion and Sun, which for thousands of years were our national flags, were united despite of different opinion or maybe different goals at this uprising. They are all united to just topple the regime. And as Mr. Eric says, I'm one of the one, remember, pre-Islamic time. I was 6 years old, and I have a very clear memory of what had happened during revolution and what Iran were looking like before the revolution. Yes, most of the Iranians were seeking this time, and Pahlavi is the symbol of this great time Iranian were had, and they were not isolated. Iranians were so well respected. Iran had voices among of the international community, and that sort of the thing I can see still. Reza Pahlavi can elaborate for them. We are not imposing anyone on Iranians, but yes. But let me finish this word. But even Reza Pahlavi says after this uprising, Iranian will decide which they like to restore. There is nothing to impose on them, and perhaps that's why President Trump hasn't met him yet.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it at that, Camelia and Tech Hab before. But Dr. Eric Mandel, thank you for joining us on Security Brief.
Pleasure.
And now a final word. It's an old debate. Are Jews as individuals or as a whole safer within the borders of Israel or scattered across the globe in the communities of the Jewish diaspora? Now, there are cases to be made for both sides, but the discussion has assumed a new urgency in recent years. On one hand, the October 7th attack and the multi-front war that erupted in its wake, which claimed the lives of so many Israeli Jews, has fueled concerns that concentrating the Jewish people in one locale, in a geopolitically hostile and unstable region, may not be the best solution for their security. On the other hand, the surge in global anti-Semitism since October 7th, an attack such as the massacre on Australia's Bondi Beach, has raised fears that diaspora communities are vulnerable in the face of rising Jew hatred and the failure of many nations to provide the necessary security for their local Jewish populations. Now, here in Israel, there is no doubt among Jews which option is safer. A recent survey by the Israel Democracy Institute found that a large majority of Israeli Jews, 76%, believe it is safer today for Jews to live in Israel, as opposed to only 15% who feel it is safer for Jews abroad. In some ways, though, this conclusion flies in the face of some glaring facts. The number of Israeli Jews killed in wars and terror attacks since the establishment of the Jewish state in 1948 far exceeds those murdered in the diaspora simply for being Jewish. So why the confidence that Israel is safer for the Jews? Well, certainly if one takes a broader historical approach, the necessity for an independent Jewish state able to defend itself is crystal clear. We are only a few generations removed from the Holocaust, in which over a third of the global Jewish population was wiped out, in a Europe that most believed had evolved beyond the barbarity displayed by the Nazi regime. Yet, since World War II, the remaining remnants of European Jewry, as well as the thriving Jewish community of North America, felt increasingly confident that the type of violent anti-Semitism seen before and during the war was a thing of the past. But that confidence has certainly been shattered by the wave of incidents targeting diaspora Jewry in recent years, culminating in last month's Bondi massacre. But despite all this, and despite Israel's ability to militarily recover from the October 7th attack and deliver crushing blows against its enemies in the region, there is a logic to the notion that the dispersion of Jews across the globe over the centuries provided a certain advantage to the continuity of the Jewish people as a whole, even if it was sometimes at the cost of security for individual Jews and individual communities. And in a time when the Jewish state's most ardent enemy is still seeking to obtain the nuclear weapons that could literally wipe this relatively small nation off the map, it is foolish to believe that Israel is immune to this, from the same fate if the tides of history turn against it. So I was glad to see that the same survey from the IDI found that 90% of Israeli Jews believe Israel should pressure foreign governments to ensure the security of Jewish communities abroad. In addition, 80% support sending emissaries from Israel to diaspora Jewish communities, and 60% back direct Israeli involvement in providing security arrangements for Jewish events abroad. Now, for decades, diaspora Jewish communities have contributed to Israel's security through financial aid, political lobbying, and moral support. Today, unfortunately, some of those communities may need Israel's help in providing security during these uncertain times. But at the end of the day, the future of both the Jewish state and the Jewish diaspora will benefit from a commitment to their shared security and the belief that any Jew anywhere in the world, be it in Israel or the diaspora, deserves a life free from fear and threats simply because they are a Jew. Thank you for joining ILTV Security Brief.
Thank you, India. And moving on, Israel is harnessing the power of bioconvergence, merging biology and technology to revolutionize the future of food and sustainability. Let's take a look.
The world is facing a crisis of food scarcity, which we already feel in the price of basic food, which keeps hiking up. This challenge is faced head-on with the help of bioconvergence, a combination of biology and technology that produces solutions to various global challenges. In Israel, the groundbreaking approach is revolutionizing food technology and reshaping the global economy. For example, each year, 8 billion fertilized male eggs are destroyed after weeks of incubation, costing billions and raising ethical concerns. Enter Exit, an Israeli startup rewriting the rules of the livestock industry. Co-founded by a neuroscientist and a lawyer whose family raised chickens, the company created a way to determine a chick's sex before it hatches. Using genetics and optical sensors, Exit's non-invasive device scans each egg at the speed of light, detecting 6 specific biomarkers through the shell. The eggs are automatically sorted, saving time, money, and resources, and sparing billions of lives.
Israel has a great innovation ecosystem, which is why so many food tech and other tech companies are mushrooming here. And the system also supports innovation and out-of-the-box thinking and pushing the limits of what solutions can be.
Another Israeli company, Genesee, is tackling global sustainability from the sea. By harnessing macroalgae, they produce high-quality, plant-based proteins for the food industry, reducing deforestation, conserving fresh water, and offering a sustainable source of nutrition.
Bioconvergence is quite a complex thing because we connect here engineering, science, biology, medicine, food tech, agriculture, so many things which are coming together, and their actual role is to solve real problems.
Both companies credit Israeli Innovation Authority and its National Bioconvergence Program for driving this new wave of breakthroughs. The program invests directly in pioneering projects, builds cutting-edge research infrastructure, and ensures the right talent enters the industry. By fostering collaboration and streamlining regulation, it helps companies bring products from the lab to the global market faster than ever. Bioconvergence is more than science. It's the fusion of biology, creativity, technology, and purpose. From sustainable protein to ethical farming, Israel's innovators are proving that when biology meets technology, the future of food is already here and knows no boundaries. To learn more about Israel's Bioconvergence program, visit the website.
Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong.
Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We are live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the last hour. I'm Devo Klein, and here is your roundup of the latest developments coming out of the region. The region currently sits on edge as the United States and the Islamic regime in Iran edge closer every day to a direct military confrontation. Here in Israel, the home front is preparing for a potential Iranian attack, as European sources tell Reuters that American intervention is imminent. Preparations for a strike are visible on the ground, with the United States beginning already to withdraw personnel from key bases in the region, despite recent comments by President Trump that he was told that the killings of protesters had stopped. Take a listen.
Who told you that the killings had stopped there? And if it's the Iranian regime?
We have been informed by very important sources on the other side, and they've said the killing has stopped and the executions won't take place. There was supposed to be a lot of executions today, and that the executions won't take place. And we're going to find out. I mean, I'll find out after this. You'll find out. But we've been told on good authority, and I hope it's true. Who knows, right? Who knows? Crazy world.
Trump also cautioned, we'll see what it all means. But new reports are now suggesting that Trump is indeed hesitant to strike, as his closest advisors had warned that a strike on the Islamic Republic would certainly weaken the regime, but not dismantle or topple it completely. All eyes are now on President Trump, with diplomacy between Washington and Tehran being completely cut off, leaving only military action as an option to halt the regime's brutal crackdown on Iranian protesters. And meanwhile, here in Israel, while the home front prepares for regional escalation, a mass rally in support of the people of Iran was held in Holon. Just over 100 Israelis gathered in the city with the largest Persian community in Israel, waving flags and chanting "Long live the Shah" in support of exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. The show of support comes as the people of Iran enter their 5th day with no internet in a mass blackout that the regime officials said would end, and reports of bodies of murdered protesters being kept in fruits and vegetable fridges as the morgues have run out of room. The rally emphasizes that Israel will always stand with the people of Iran. And yesterday's announcement by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff changed the game in Gaza, with the United States formally declaring the commencement of Phase 2 in President Trump's plan for Gaza. Witkoff said Phase 2 will establish a transitional Palestinian technocratic administration in Gaza, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, or NCAG, tasked with running the day-to-day civil affairs in the Strip. According to Witkoff, the new phase also marks the beginning of full demilitarization and reconstruction, with the primary focus on the disarmament of all unauthorized armed groups. This announcement is being praised by Qatari and Egyptian mediators, but also by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who said the Trump administration is creating new pathways toward peace. All of this unfolds as Ran Gvili, the final Israeli hostage, enters his 832nd day of captivity. Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with the family of Gvili, ensuring that the return of his body is still a top priority of his government, emphasizing that the move to Phase 2 will not affect the ongoing searches for Gvili's body and the efforts to bring him home. Israeli officials are closely watching the new committee, confirming that the names of the NCAG are, quote, familiar to the state of Israel, each with backgrounds of working with Israeli and international bodies. Heading the committee will be Ali Shath, a former PA deputy minister and senior civil servant, described by Israeli security officials as a moderate Fatah figure who stayed away from militant politics. And to wrap up, a 4.2 magnitude earthquake was detected in Israel this morning. Warnings were sent to several areas in Israel along the Dead Sea and Jerusalem areas. As of this report, no damages have been documented, but some residents did say that they felt the quake. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. Scan the QR code that's on your screen to get all of the latest developments coming out of Israel. We're here every hour on the Hour with the latest breaking news. I am Devo Klein, and thank you so much for watching.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Emily Schrader, and coming up in today's newscast, President Trump calls on Iranians to continue protests against the regime, promising help is on the way. Israel severs ties with 7 UN agencies over long-standing anti-Israel bias. As anti-Semitism surges globally, Israel approves new plan to encourage immigration. Help is on its way. U.S. President Donald Trump is calling on Iranians to keep protesting and to take over state institutions as the death toll at mass demonstrations against the Islamic Republic continues to rise. Trump has yet to indicate what form the help will take or how long it may take to arrive. But this afternoon, U.S. bases in Qatar were partially evacuated. Meanwhile, the Islamic Republic continues to pretend the uprising is over, even whilst the country has been cut off from the internet for over 5 days. As it attempts to project strength, 5 major Iranian banks, including Bank SEPA, are on the verge of total collapse. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has been following the latest developments.
U.S. President Donald Trump said he's canceled all meetings with Iranian officials until the deadly crackdown ends, but did not specify what form the help he promised might take or when it might be delivered, leaving America's next steps unclear. Trump has also warned that those responsible for killing protesters will pay a big price, even as he says American pressure, including potential military, cyber, or economic action, is still under active consideration.
Iran is on my mind when I see the kind of death that is happening over there, we think. So we're going to get some accurate numbers. I'll have it in about 20 minutes. We'll get some accurate numbers as to what's happening with regard to the killing. The killing looks like it's significant, but we don't know yet for certain. I'll know within 20 minutes. So, and we'll act accordingly.
Do you think it's going to be something kinetic like that, or more like cyber?
Well, I can't tell you that. I know exactly what it would be. We have to make a decision. But I can't be. Obviously, I can't be telling you.
Insiders say Trump is less enthusiastic than before last year's strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Some call the new strike a coin flip. Concerns include operational failure, escalation, or Iran collapsing into chaos or a more militant regime. The National Security Council is reviewing options including economic pressure, cyber attacks, or targeted action without recommending a course. Iranian authorities report about 2,000 people killed in the unrest, a figure they offered publicly in an unusual acknowledgement. But U.S. and foreign sources say the real toll is higher. The U.S.-based human rights activist news agency, relied on by Israel and other governments, say at least 2,571 people have been killed, including protesters, security forces, children, and civilians, and more than 18,000 have been detained across the country. Estimates vary widely, with opposition-aligned media claiming up to 12,000 casualties or even higher figures as communication gaps slow confirmation. Meanwhile, Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's last Shah, said opposition forces are ready to step in if the clerical regime collapses, and he urged U.S. lawmakers to back measures that empower Iranians. Axios reported that White House envoy Steve Witkoff met with Pahlavi over the weekend to discuss the protests in Iran. Pahlavi called for support from free nations that stand on the right side of history.
Arab states are reportedly pressuring the U.S. to hold off on any military strike against Iran, and some have reported that Israeli officials also requested a delay, believing that the Iranian regime is not yet weak enough for such action to result in regime change. Reports from NBC News cite sources, including U.S. officials, indicating a strong preference to wait until the regime is more vulnerable. In recent talks, Israeli officials have expressed support for American efforts to instigate regime change, but raised concerns that military action alone might not be sufficient. They recommended alternative strategies to undermine the Islamic Republic regime, such as supporting protesters, boosting economic sanctions, engaging in cyber attacks, and targeted strikes against key leaders. Arab officials have also reportedly shown reservations about an imminent U.S. strike, with some repeating the regime's arguments that such actions could unify Iranians with the regime. However, political interests related to oil are far more likely the key determinant of the Arab states' position on U.S. intervention in the Iranian uprisings. Well, joining us now to discuss the current situation in Iran is the advocacy director at NUFTI, the National Union for Democracy in Iran, and a former political prisoner himself in Iran, Navid Mohebi. Navid, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start by asking you, what is the current status of the protests as it stands today?
Thank you for having me on. For 16 days, brave Iranian men and women took to the street challenging the regime. But we saw what happened. Just 2 days ago, we realized that the Islamic Republic regime massacred more than 12,000 Iranians in the street. And so the regime was able to at least put a pause on the ongoing protests. But I think that this is not going to be the end of a story. Revolution is a marathon, is not a 2 weeks event. So we are going to see another form of resistance from the Iranian people, whether in the street or through other civil disobedience in the country. I think that no nation is destined to be slaughtered, tortured, or massacred. And I think it's time for the international community to intervene and change the balance in favor of the Iranian people. And I hope that President Trump moves quickly and strike the leaders inside the regime. What we need, I think, is a larger scale air campaign against the regime. I've always said this, the most effective way to deal with this regime is to decapitate the leadership. I think there are roughly 50 or 60 decision makers at the top. And I think that once they are targeted, the mid-levels official, they're going to lose their will to fight, and they're not going to resist. I think at this moment, Israel, after all the promises that they have made, I think they also must come to the aid of Iranian people. I think Israel needs to step up in a much bigger way. Expectation inside Iran are extremely high.
You know, Navid, you brought up something interesting I do want to ask you, because we're hearing right now a lot of Western pundits speaking really over Iranians in the past few weeks and claiming that the people are against foreign intervention. But we hear voices on the ground saying otherwise. I'd love to settle this debate. Do Iranians want help, military help from the U.S. and/or Israel, or not?
Absolutely. You know what? Internet was shut down, but there were a very small number of people that were able to reach out to the outside world through Starlink. And we have seen so many messages and voice messages from inside the country, people begging for international help. They understand that in order to bring down the regime, international community support is absolutely necessary, because this regime is armed to the teeth and is willing to kill to the last person. Every day I'm checking the Iranian regime's outlets. They are vowing for more crackdown. They are arresting more people. So dark days are ahead of Iranian people if we don't see international community's intervention in Iran. As I mentioned earlier in my at the start of the interview, no nation is the same to be slaughtered, tortured, or massacred. Iranians have shown their resolve that they don't want this regime, but for whatever reason, this regime is ruthless and they overpower them. So we need to change the balance of power in favor of the Iranians. And the only way that we can deal with this regime, and the only thing that this regime understands, is the American might. We all remember during the first round of Iran-Israel war, we have seen so many dead bodies of regime officials piled up. And so the regime understands that when they understand that Israel or United States, they're not defenseless Iranian people that can be easily slaughtered. So the situation is going to be much different. So absolutely, you will see Iranian regime apologies outside the country opposing foreign intervention. You know what? I think this is the moment, it's a moral test for the international community. I think for generations to come, they're going to ask them, what have you done when Iranian people were being massacred? What have you done when Iranian people asked your help? Let's not forget, I remember watching interviews of President Bill Clinton. He was asked, what is your biggest regret during your time of presidency? He said, I should have intervened in Rwanda genocide. Why? Because I was the only one who could prevent it, and I could save more than 300,000 lives. So the international community's intervention is absolutely necessary. I think we should ignore some of these so-called pundits in Washington, D.C., who are regime apologists, and listen to the voice of Iranian people inside the country.
All right, we have to leave it at that. But I want to thank you, Naveed Mohabbi, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on.
Imagine earning your master's degree on top of Mount Carmel, where forest meets sea and where every day brings a new cultural, academic, and personal adventure. This is the multi-experience at U Haifa International. Here, students from around the world live and learn together in Israel's most culturally diverse city, meeting new people, discovering new perspectives, and shaping their own Israel experience.
There's people from different countries, from different religions and different languages. Somehow we are all very similar.
At U Haifa, academics meet real life. You don't just study, you experience Israel up close, explore Haifa's mountain ocean city life, and build global friendships that last a lifetime.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience. It opens your mind, your network, and your world.
U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
U.S. President Donald Trump is today expected to announce the second phase of his plan to end the war in Gaza, even as fighting continues on the ground and key issues, including the return of the final hostage Ran Gvili and Hamas disarmament, remain unresolved. ILTV's Devo Klein has the latest.
According to reports in Washington, the plan, due to be announced today, includes the creation of a new international body, the Peace Council for Gaza, tasked with overseeing developments in the Strip. The council is expected to be headed by former UN Middle East envoy Nikolai Mladenov. The reports also say a Palestinian technocratic government would be established to administer Gaza and replace Hamas rule. The Trump administration is also expected to announce the appointment of 15 Palestinian technocrats to temporarily run Gaza under a body to be known as the International Committee for the Administration of Gaza. The committee would handle day-to-day civil affairs, while Mladenov is expected to oversee implementations as part of the U.S.-led Peace Council for Gaza. Details on a proposed international stabilization force have not yet been decided. The announcement is expected despite Hamas still holding the body of Israeli hostage Ran Gvili, and without any public commitment from Hamas to disarm. Just last week, Prime Minister Netanyahu said an understanding had been reached with President Trump that the Rafah border crossing would remain closed until the hostage is returned. Hamas says its delegation has arrived in Cairo for talks on the second phase of the ceasefire. The delegation is led by senior Hamas official Khalil al-Haya and is meeting with Egyptian mediators. According to Hamas, the talks will address the opening of the Rafah crossing, the formation of an independent Palestinian technocratic commission, and the withdrawal of Israeli forces. Meanwhile, it's day 831 of the war in Gaza. The IDF says Israeli troops clashed with armed terrorists in southern Gaza in an incident the military describes as a violation of the ceasefire. According to the IDF, field observers identified 6 armed terrorists in western Rafah, near Israeli forces operating in the area. Tanks were dispatched and opened fire. The terrorists then shot at one of the tanks, triggering an exchange of fire. There were also targeted airstrikes, killing the gunmen. The military says troops are continuing to search the area for the remaining gunmen, and that forces remain on high alert across southern Gaza, even as diplomatic efforts to move to Phase 2 continue.
Jerusalem has taken a major step amid growing frustration over what it calls systemic and long-standing anti-Israel bias. Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar announced that Israel is severing ties with 7 UN agencies effective immediately, saying they have failed to act professionally, have singled out Israel, or have become platforms for political attacks. The agencies include the UN Office for Children and Armed Conflict, UN Women, the UN Conference on Trade and Development, the UN Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, the UN Alliance of Civilizations, UN Energy, and the Global Forum on Migration and Development. The Foreign Ministry says the decision follows a series of moves at the UN since the October 7th attacks, which Israel says have demonstrated a pattern of double standards and moral failure. Israel ended cooperation with the UN Office for Children and Armed Conflict after it placed the IDF on a blacklist alongside terror organizations including Hamas, ISIS, and Boko Haram. Jerusalem also withdrew from UN Women, accusing the agency of deliberately ignoring sexual violence committed against Israeli women during the October 7th massacre. Officials say other agencies produced what they called virulent anti-Israel reports, promoted political agendas under the guise of human rights, or reflected an inefficient and bloated UN bureaucracy. The Foreign Ministry says the move is part of a broader review of Israel's relationship with the United Nations, as Jerusalem signals it will no longer cooperate with bodies it believes undermine Israel's security or legitimacy. Israel and Germany have signed a historic security partnership, marking a major step in joint defense against shared threats, with Israel's leadership in defense, cybersecurity, and advanced technology now formally recognized on the global stage. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu linked Iran's growing threat to regional and international stability to the new Defense and Cybersecurity Pact signed in Jerusalem with German Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt. Netanyahu said Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis, pose a direct danger not only to Israel, but to the entire region and beyond. The agreement establishes deep cooperation in cybersecurity, counterterrorism, and advanced technologies, and signals a clear commitment to joint security action. Minister Dobrindt called the pact a new strategic level of partnership rooted in Germany's historic responsibility and its commitment to Israel's security. Netanyahu highlighted existing defense cooperation, including the delivery of Israel's Arrow 3 missile defense system to Germany last December, capable of intercepting long-range ballistic missiles. The prime minister said the agreement underscores Israel's strengthening ties with major powers, adding that Israel is, quote, on an upward trend in security and international cooperation, despite pressure from parts of Europe.
I attach enormous importance to the cooperation, overall cooperation between Israel and Germany, and especially Israel and Germany on this question of cybersecurity, which is one of the main threats to our internal security and in many ways also our infrastructure and other threats.
An Israeli-Argentinian man imprisoned in Venezuela for more than a year has been released and has returned home to Israel following an intensive multi-country diplomatic effort led by Israel and its allies. The Prime Minister's office confirmed that Yaakov Harari, 72, landed in Israel yesterday after being held by the Venezuelan regime since January 2025. Harari had traveled to South America in the spring of 2024 for business purposes, including to Venezuela, when he was detained. He was convicted in absentia and sentenced to 25 years in prison on allegations of terrorism and sabotage, charges for which Caracas provided no public evidence. He was arrested as part of a broad sweep in which Venezuela detained around 125 people, mostly U.S. citizens, accusing them of participating in an alleged U.S.-backed coup plot. Claims denied and apparently politically motivated. Harari was handed over to the community rabbi in Caracas, transferred to a third country not publicly identified, and from there flown to Israel. Upon his return, Harari told Israeli officials he witnessed what he described as severe and harsh conditions inside the Venezuelan prison system. Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with Harari and his two daughters, thanking Israeli security and diplomatic teams, as well as the United States, Germany, Austria, and other partner governments for their assistance. Well, Jewish National Fund USA's Faculty Fellowship Program in Israel recently wrapped up, the program bringing non-Jewish American college and university professors to Israel for an immersive, eye-opening experience. Today, we're speaking with two distinguished participants, Paul Yankee and Kathy Elias, to share how this trip helped shape their perspectives and strengthen their narratives. Paul and Kathy, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, how have your preconceived notions of Israel been challenged? Paul, let's start with you.
Thank you. I have been very excited about being in Israel and experiencing Israel. I came very curious. And the preconceived elements that I might have had was that there was very much a living under pressure. But what I also saw was a stronger resilience and a stronger resolve than I had expected. And with that, great insight, great ability, and also a very caring heart in many different ways. So I didn't come with necessarily super strong preconceptions one way or the other. I had a great respect already for Israel coming from my days working in technology and the intelligence that they bring into that space. And so I was really wanting to understand more how this all works, how these countries that are having such disparate views on things able to coincide together.
And Kathy, can you share from your perspective your experience as well?
Well, I want to point out that I'm coming this time on the faculty fellowship as an ambassador. So I've been here before, and so this is the second time around. And so I'm looking at very different things. The first time around, a lot of what Paul said, looking at all the innovation, looking at all the really wonderful things that have gone on in terms of research and all in Israel. But this time I've come and I've tried to focus more on the people. And coming from a university that had a lot of problems and a lot of negative actions on campus, I tried to talk to a lot of students also when I was here. And one of the things, I want to bring back that I think is extremely important to our students is just how much many of the students here, of course, are very similar in what they like about government, what they don't like about government, their criticisms, but also their desire to live the same kind of good life and their willingness to really want to engage with students in the United States and be heard.
Paul, what will you be taking back with you to campus from what you've learned or experienced here on the program?
I'll first off say we've had a very full 12 days of visiting a lot of different universities, a lot of different organizations, businesses, museums. And I will tell you, my mind is still very much processing. I'm looking forward to bringing all this together, letting it gel. But one thing that I have seen is I think there's a great need in my university setting and in my element of the areas of influence I have to consider more the consequences of things. And that's something that I've definitely seen be very paramount in Israel is consequences are real and deep for everything that comes up. And I think there can be this context of not considering always the consequences as it plays out to all the related constituents to different elements that come up. So that's one piece that I want to bring out. I also want to bring more of a perspective of what's really happening, what's really going on. I think when you're able to experience different cultures, different areas, the best way, without any question, to do it is to actually be there. And JNF affords that possibility for people, particularly for academics in this situation.
All right, Kathy Elias and Paul Yankee, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today and sharing with us your insights and experiences.
Thank you very much for having us.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 9 degrees Celsius or 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see cloudy skies alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 17 degrees Celsius or 59 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's ILTV_Israel on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you for watching.
And joining us now with more on the latest developments in Iran and the possibility of U.S. intervention is Jason Brodsky, Policy Director at United Against Nuclear Iran. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So estimates now say that over 12,000 Iranians have been shot by the regime. The number, of course, is likely much higher. And with each passing day that the United States does not intervene, this likely and unfortunately means more bodies will pile up. So what are the considerations in the White House regarding intervention? And, after issuing the threat, why is President Trump not acting?
Well, it's great to be with you. I think that the United States has a lot of options to employ against the Iranian regime to protect and support the Iranian people, where there are diplomatic, economic, military, and informational as well. So there are all these tools that we have in the toolbox, and I think the key is to synchronize them in a way for maximum impact. And I do suspect that we will see tangible actions being rolled out as this week goes on. We've already seen the president issue a new tariff for all countries doing business with Iran. And so I think that we'll be seeing more steps in the coming days. I believe the United States needs a multi-pronged effort, one that is concentrated on cyber attacks against the Islamic Republic suppressive apparatus, targeted military strikes against suppressive apparatus forces as well. We also need economic sanctions to be employed, particularly against Iran's supreme leader personally, his son, and others pursuant to the Massa Act and the Magnitsky Act authorities that Western countries have. There should also be diplomatic isolation employed by the European governments to isolate the regime throughout the world and downgrade their respective diplomatic ties. So there are a lot of options here, but I think the United States needs to lead a coalition of countries to synchronize them and to get them rolled out for maximum impact.
Mm-hmm. The Iranian people are openly calling for the United States to intervene here and to help them. Now, Israel has also thought of striking twice in recent weeks, according to reports, but has held off. The reason some critics believe is that foreign intervention could actually undermine the legitimacy of the protest movement inside Iran. Is that actually a valid concern?
No, I don't think it's a valid concern. That's an outdated and faulty assumption. I think that regime sympathizers have really tried to promote this line for years, and unfortunately, as a result, I see some U.S. policymakers and others echoing it. This is something that the Iranian people have been asking for. They've been asking for U.S. support, and so I think that we have to listen to their voices on the ground, and we have to also be aware that, recall during the 12-day war, there were warnings that if the United States injected itself militarily, there would be a rally around the flag effect. That didn't really last. So I think we have to apply that to this situation as well.
And now here in Israel, Jerusalem is watching the events unfold in Iran very closely, especially given the nuclear threat and the ballistic missile threat. How does the internal unrest intersect with, the nuclear issue? Does the regime become more dangerous externally as it grows weaker internally?
I think that there is a concern that the regime could lash out externally to deflect pressure that it's facing. Let's not forget, during the last cycle of protests, the Masa Amini protests, in 2022 to 2023, the U.S. And Saudi Arabia received intelligence that the Iranian regime was thinking of striking Saudi Arabia in response to the protests. So that is a very real concern, and I think Israel does have to be on heightened alert.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned sort of the role that the international community should be playing right now. What are we seeing as of now from Western governments? Are they doing enough to support the Iranian people?
Not at the moment at all. I think Western governments need to move beyond tweets and statements. Those are necessary, but certainly woefully insufficient. As I stated earlier, there are a series of options and tools that Western countries have to hold the Iranian regime accountable. Now, they know about those tools, believe me. I think it's just a question of political will, and the time has come for the West to recognize that this regime is completely illegitimate. And I think we're starting to see that. The German chancellor made some very striking statements today suggesting that the regime could fall within days or weeks. That's a very dramatic statement for the German chancellor to make. He said that the regime has no legitimacy, and so let him put his mouth where his money is, and for them to actually roll out tangible steps to isolate and pressure the Iranian regime while supporting the Iranian people.
Mm-hmm. And if the goal is indeed a free Iran, a safer region, I mean, what should Washington and Jerusalem be doing more of? You mentioned that at the beginning, but also what should they avoid doing?
I think Washington should avoid getting trapped in a negotiating process with the Iranian regime at this time. I think the worst thing the U.S. could do is to have a diplomatic meeting with Iran's foreign minister at this moment, because it would be considered an external intervention at a time when the Iranian people are trying to dislodge the Islamic Republic. And that would be a disaster in my view. It would send a terrible message for the United States. And we should be declaring that the days of diplomacy with the Islamic Republic are over, because there is no prospect for a durable diplomatic understanding with this regime as long as it's in power.
Absolutely. So critical days ahead. Jason Brodsky, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Thank you.
And joining us now with more on the protests in Iran and a possible U.S. and Israeli intervention is Nati Tubian, an expert on Iran. Nati, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So we're hearing very troubling reports, seeing shocking video of hundreds, if not thousands, of bodies lining the streets of Iran as the regime is opening live fire on the protesters and employing other measures as well against the Iranian people, taking out the internet. What is the situation in Iran right now, and are the protests showing any signs of dying down?
Just to put things in the correct order, the figure that you mentioned is probably much higher. I talked to an Iranian journalist, and he says that he fears that the number has already exceeds more than 10,000 killed by the regime.
Wow.
And I tend to believe him, because in the riot, in the unrest, I think 7 years ago, due to the the price of the petrol, the gas that was tripled overnight, respectable news agencies reported that some 200, 300, or 500 Iranians were killed. But now, according to the recent data that we have received, the figure is around 5,000 kills 7 years ago. So probably the figures are much higher. This journalist with whom I'm in constant contact, he resides in Europe. Nothing to be worried about him, but he says that around 150 young Iranians, including married couples who have been married for less than 2 months, have left wills with their pictures and testimonies and full details, and said they know that they are going to participate in the protest. They have no other choice, and they will probably not come back safe and sound. The married couple says that they didn't have the chance to go to the honeymoon, and this is going to be probably their honeymoon for Iran.
So really tragic stories that we're hearing from the Iranian people, and of course the figures that we have are not official, and estimates, as you said, the numbers are clearly much higher. Now the Islamic regime, they're not backing down. They're still opening live fire despite threats from the United States. Are the Ayatollahs still firmly in control of the country right now, or is there a real threat that they could fall in the coming days, weeks, or possibly months?
The picture is not clear, but seeing the response, I can deduce that this is clearly because of lack of sufficient soldiers for the regime to crack down the demonstrations. Iran has already lost its major proxy, Hezbollah. We know that in the recent protests, Nasrallah had sent thousands of Hezbollah members to crack down and to suppress the uprisings. They don't have Hezbollah. The popular mobilization of Iraq are also unable, although we have reports that some hundreds of these people who are Iranian proxies have been supporting in cracking down the protests in southern parts of Iran. But it is clear that the Iranian regime is in distress.
And add to that, U.S. President Trump has threatened to intervene. We heard his comments earlier. Reports indicate it's not a question of when, not a question of if, a question of when. So what would the U.S. need to do to ensure that these protests do succeed? And, would essentially taking out the Ayatollah himself, would that bring down the regime?
Well, I have no clear indication what the U.S. is going to do regarding, assisting the Iranian people. As you have already mentioned, there are many possibilities. Direct strike on Basij, the military branch of the IRGC, even cyber attacks or other things. I don't know. But
no, I guess the question is what would best help the Iranian people? So how could the U.S. intervene to best help the Iranian people?
Weaken the regime, weaken the suppressing ability of the regime. I don't know how exactly are they going to do it, and if that is not enough, I only remember what the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a few days ago. He encouraged the people to take to streets, and he said that Israel is behind them. How exactly is Israel behind Iranian protesters in these days? I don't know. So it is the picture is mostly vague and uncertain.
Certainly a vague picture, tragic what's going on in Iran, but Israel and the United States, of course, behind the Iranian people. Nati Tubian, thank you so much for joining us today and for providing your unique insights.
Thank you. All the best.
As Iran's protests continue to sweep across the country and reports of deadly crackdowns mount, we're now joined by Iranian historian and lecturer at Yale University, Arash Azizi, to help us understand the deeper currents behind these days of unrest and what might mean for the future of the region. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for being with me.
So, from your perspective as an Iranian historian, what distinguishes this wave from past unrest? Could this actually be the pivotal moment for Iranians?
It is quite a pivotal moment, and it's not hard to see that it spells the end of the Islamic Republic, although the path to get there is rocky. and unfortunately bloody. The regime has shown massive propensity to violence. It has probably killed hundreds of people. It's hard to know because it has also imposed a blackdown, but it has very likely killed hundreds of people. I unfortunately already know someone myself who was killed in these protests. What distinguishes them from the past is that it's two things, I would say. First of all, they have really gotten a more insurrectionary, revolutionary character, much more than the previous rounds. And we're talking about many previous rounds. There are 5 or 6 previous rounds in the last few years. But this time, they really have a revolutionary character. They shouted the slogans against the regime in the past as well. But this time, they really have that sort of will to replace the regime and that feeling that it has come to its end. The other big difference is that the regime had different cards to play. It had a narrative to run, so to speak. But it has run out of those. It has seen all its regional allies, these different militias in the Arab world, in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Yemen and other places. It's seen them decimated. The axis of resistance doesn't really exist as it did before. The Syrian regime fell, of course. The regime in Venezuela fell. And the regime has been unable to come to an agreement with the West. So it oversees a declining economy, an unaccountable ruling class that is unable to give its populace anything. So it's different because people can't take it anymore and they're in this revolutionary mood. And the ruling class is clearly unable to rule anymore.
Well, firstly, I'm sorry for your loss. Secondly, it seems the government has imposed an internet blackout and cut communication lines as protests spread nationwide, making it harder to fully assess what is happening on the ground. How will this impact the protests and what could come next?
First, it has impacted the protests, obviously, because it's harder for them to get news from elsewhere. And it's harder for us to be in touch with our family and sort of with different people. But it also enrages them, quite likely, and pushes them further. As for the next steps, revolutions are notoriously hard to predict their course. But what will happen is effectively interaction of a few different factors. So it's a few different actors, rather. So it's the people on the street, the actions that they'll take, whether they'll take a strike action. It's the opposition leaders, at least one of them, Reza Pahlavi, the former crown prince who's based in the US. He has some supporters in Iran, but there are other opposition leaders outside and inside the country who will get their act together to make different political decisions that will affect the street. It's the regime itself and different bodies inside it. Will enough people from inside the regime leave this sinking ship? Perhaps put Ayatollah Khamenei under house arrest, put him aside, and try to bring some sort of a transition. And of course, the United States and Israel as the main adversaries of the regime, and what kind of interactions they have, and what kind of deals they would want to make with forces inside the regime, forces outside the regime. The complex interactions between these actors is what will make the next move. But it's quite clear that a status quo is untenable, and Islamic Republic as we know it is not long for this world.
Iran's supreme leader has publicly blamed the U.S. and Israel for contributing to the unrest. How much of that narrative is a tactic to delegitimize domestic dissent? And in your opinion, could Iran realistically be preparing to strike Israel and U.S. targets?
That's a very good question. It is definitely a tactic to delegitimize the protests. But the Iran's Defense Council has recently declared that it changed its sort of defense doctrine, that it believes in a preemptive strike. It does appear like striking Israel or the U.S. forces in the region might be an option the regime would want to pursue, but it's unclear to see how this would do it any good. It'll likely enter country into a war. And last time there was a war, the Israeli-American war, 12-day war. This was not good news for the protest movements in many ways because they had a hard time doing anything. It might want to drag the country into a war in order to sort of bury the revolution, but it's not clear that this will help it at all. It would probably precipitate its downfall.
Arash Azizi, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Well, joining us now to shed more light on the imminent conflicts in the region is Dr. Walid Faraz, a foreign policy expert in Washington, a former policy advisor to Donald Trump, and the author of Iran Imperialist Republic. Dr. Faraz, thank you so much for joining us. Pleasure to have you here. Let's start with those Iran protests. How likely are we to see action from Trump, given dozens have already been killed by regime forces?
Well, I mean, in comparison with past cycles where U.S. presidents have not intervened, I'm talking about 2009 when former President Obama was in charge, as we all know, it was a disaster. But now we have a certainty almost, at least his statements, his tweets, that he will not allow massacres to take place on the streets and public places in Iran. How will that happen? We don't know. But there is a commitment now by the Trump administration to protect, between brackets, the Iranian protesters, and we will see in what way that will happen. It could happen directly. It could happen by asking a third party to help. That is to be seen.
Well, I want to move to Lebanon. I mean, the government there is claiming that they disarmed Hezbollah, even whilst the IDF knows that that certainly isn't the case because they're striking Hezbollah targets and weapons cache. Is the government lying? And if so, why?
Well, the Lebanese NGOs, at least Lebanese American NGOs, have been very clear, and members of the Lebanese parliament are also clear that the Lebanese army did not really disarm Hezbollah, neither south of the Litani nor north of the Litani. The Lebanese army, actually, the government, the president, have promised that there will be a plan and that the public will look at the plan and agree or disagree or demand more. This plan has not finished yet. So what we see is a makeup, kind of a maquillage in the south on behalf of the government, on behalf of the army, so that the United States and the rest of the international community will continue to supply them with logistics, etc. The reality on the ground is that Hezbollah maybe doesn't have those high buildings anymore in the south because of Israelis' bombardments, but Hezbollah is still present in the south, in the southern border, and of course in the southern areas of Beirut as well.
Now, do you expect to see a major escalation between Hezbollah and Israel in the near future, given that Trump reportedly gave Israel a green light to attack due to these ceasefire violations?
On Lebanon, the Trump administration and Israel see eye to eye. They are going to take action. The lead will be Israel, as we saw that since the meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump weeks ago. But when will that happen? We don't know. Israel is always preparing. But there is a pressure, a very serious pressure by the United States on the Lebanese government, the sitting Lebanese government, to at least do the minimum. They told them, if you don't do the south now because you can't or there are concerns, at least there are many posts of Hezbollah along the borders or along the mountains, peaks. At least show us that you can do something. I don't know if the Lebanese government will do it because they are concerned about a Hezbollah retaliation against them. I'm talking about assassinations or attacks.
It's certainly something we've seen already for many years in Lebanon as a result of Hezbollah. But I want to get to Gaza before I let you go. In Gaza, as we heard, Trump is implementing phase 2 over the weekend through his Board of Peace. But not all the hostages are home, and Hamas has been adamant that they will not disarm. Is Trump making a mistake here, or what is his thinking pushing forward with phase 2?
Well, there are forces in the region that are maneuvering to push and pressure our administration to take steps that are convenient to Hamas, but not convenient to Israel. We remind the viewers that President Trump declared a 20-point project in Sharm el-Sheikh, signed by many powers, including Arab countries, so on and so forth. Number one, Israel withdrew to the separation line, that is the yellow or the orange line. That was done. Part 2 was supposed to be a Hamas withdrawal. Hamas never withdrew. So now practically there is an East Gaza and a West Gaza, and Hamas is in control of West Gaza. President Trump, if we all remember, just a few months ago told Hamas, either you disarm or we're going to come and disarm you. So at this point in time, it will be difficult to start construction and reconstruction with a jihadi militia, below the buildings and around the parking lots. So there need to be a pressure on Hamas to begin the disarming before considering any other phase.
All right, we'll leave it at that. I want to thank you, Dr. Walid Faras, for your insights today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And joining us now with more on the latest in the region is Iftach Bulman, geopolitics expert from the Middle East Learning Academy and Bar-Ilan University. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the Islamic Republic of Iran, sort of the head of the octopus. There's a growing tension in the region that a second war with Iran may be imminent, especially after U.S. President Trump warned that the United States would intervene should the regime kill protesters, which we now know it is doing. Do you share that assessment? Are we headed for another confrontation with the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Well, if you mean Israel, well, naturally Israel wants to protect itself from any escalating threat coming from Iran. Therefore, it will engage against any evidence of force buildup by the Iranian regime, such as moving of nuclear-related materials or changing in and around the nuclear sites of Iran. And of course, we understand that Iran is reconstructing its ballistic missile array, which proved to be a very effective weapon against Israel. And so the IDF will be poised to launch an attack against that kind of an arsenal. However, there seems to be somewhat of a catch-22 here, as the demonstrations of Iran might lead the regime to see an Israeli attack as the lesser evil. Therefore, it can facilitate a narrative that the Iranians need to all unite in the face of an outside attack on the country, enabling the regime to crack down more forcibly against the demonstrators. Therefore, we might see Israel operating against the Islamic Republic's armament in a more covert manner, potentially using assets on the ground, much like we saw before October 7 in the beginning of Rising Lion operation. But as far as the U.S. And Trump's threat, I think that might lead for a combined operation which will, in a sense, kill two birds in one stone.
I know we've talked about the prospects of war. Let's talk for a moment about the prospects of peace. Moving on to Syria, you know, the Paris talks are being hailed as somewhat of a breakthrough. What exactly does this mean, and is normalization on the table as well?
Well, the Paris talks between Syria and Israel yielded one key element, at the very least, which was the beginning of coordination between the Syrian and Israeli security forces, a deconfliction mechanism of sorts. It's too early to call it a cooperation or a collaboration between the two governments. However, it does provide insight about the future milestones of this relationship, meaning security arrangements in southern Syria, in incorporation of other states, potentially, like Jordan is incorporated in the most recent understandings, and obviously the U.S., some sort of a mechanism to be put in place in favor of the Druze and the Syrian Golan to be receiving aid and protection, and some sort of a joint oversight by both Syria and Israel's IDF over the disarmament of different factions in southern Syria. So it does give us hope for future normalization agreement, but I wouldn't prepare the red ribbon just yet for the future agreement.
And how does Somaliland tie into Israel's strategic outlook? I mean, the foreign minister is visiting the country today after Israel recognized Somaliland. What is the purpose of the visit, and how does it tie into Israel's, sort of strategic outlook?
Well, the sudden recognition of Somaliland tells us that finally Israel is adopting diplomacy as part of its geopolitical game, not just using weapons or military deterrence for its geopolitical aspects. Now, it's been mentioned that Somaliland can be used as a jumping point for future attacks against the Houthis, across the coast, especially if or when Israel engages against Iran. By the way, both for Israel's aerial vehicles and naval vehicles in a potential attack. However, Sarah's visit does demonstrate that Israel is formally backing this embrace of Somaliland and with political aspects and potentially in cooperation with the Emirates that has invested in the country extensively in the past. So this could be seen as a more regional move rather than just Israel connecting with Somaliland.
All right, so a lot of developments here in the region will, of course, continue to follow. Iftar Bulman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We are live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the last hour. I'm Devo Klein, and here is your roundup of the latest developments coming out of the region. The region currently sits on edge as the United States and the Islamic regime in Iran edge closer every day to a direct military confrontation. Here in Israel, the home front is preparing for a potential Iranian attack, as European sources tell Reuters that American intervention is imminent. Preparations for a strike are visible on the ground, with the United States beginning already to withdraw personnel from key bases in the region, despite recent comments by President Trump that he was told that the killings of protesters had stopped. Take a listen.
Who told you that the killings have stopped there? And if it's the Iranian regime?
We have been informed by very important sources on the other side, and they've said the killing has stopped and the executions won't take place. There was supposed to be a lot of executions today, and that the executions won't take place. And we're going to find out. I mean, I'll find out after this. You'll find out. But we've been told on good authority, and I hope it's true. Who knows, right? Who knows? Crazy world.
Trump also cautioned, "We'll see what it all means." But new reports are now suggesting that Trump is indeed hesitant to strike, as his closest advisors had warned that a strike on the Islamic Republic would certainly weaken the regime, but not dismantle or topple it completely. All eyes are now on President Trump, with diplomacy between Washington and Tehran being completely cut off, leaving only military action as an option to halt the regime's brutal crackdown on Iranian protesters. And meanwhile, here in Israel, while the home front prepares for regional escalation, a mass rally in support of the people of Iran was held in Holon. Just over 100 Israelis gathered in the city, with the largest Persian community in Israel, waving flags and chanting "Long live the Shah" in support of exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. The show of support comes as the people of Iran enter their 5th day with no internet, in a mass blackout that the regime officials said would end, and reports of bodies of murdered protesters being kept in fruits and vegetable fridges, as the morgues have run out of room. The rally emphasizes that Israel will always stand with the people of Iran. And yesterday's announcement by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff changed the game in Gaza, with the United States formally declaring the commencement of Phase 2 in President Trump's plan for Gaza. Witkoff said Phase 2 will establish a transitional Palestinian technocratic administration in Gaza, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, or NCAG, tasked with running the day-to-day civil affairs in the Strip. According to Witkoff, the new phase also marks the beginning of full demilitarization and reconstruction, with a primary focus on the disarmament of all unauthorized armed groups. This announcement is being praised by Qatari and Egyptian mediators, but also by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who said the Trump administration is creating new pathways toward peace. All of this unfolds as Ran Gvili, the final Israeli hostage, enters his 832nd day of captivity. Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with the family of Gvili, ensuring that the return of his body is still a top priority of his government, emphasizing that the move to phase 2 will not affect the ongoing searches for Gvili's body and the efforts to bring him home. Israeli officials are closely watching the new committee, confirming that the names of the NCAG are, quote, familiar to the state of Israel, each with backgrounds of working with Israeli and international bodies. Heading the committee will be Ali Shath, a former PA deputy minister and senior civil servant, described by Israeli security officials as a moderate Fatah figure who stayed away from militant politics. And to wrap up, a 4.2 magnitude earthquake was detected in Israel this morning. Warnings were sent to several areas in Israel along the Dead Sea and Jerusalem areas. As of this report, no damages have been documented, but some residents did say that they felt the quake. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. Scan the QR code that's on your screen to get all of the latest developments coming out of Israel. We're here every hour on the Hour with the latest breaking news. I am Devo Klein, and thank you so much for watching.
Good evening and welcome to ILTV Insider. Iran is at a crossroads. Protests are spreading, the regime is cracking down, and the United States is weighing negotiations against military action. For Israel, every option carries risk. Tonight we ask, how far is Washington willing to go? Can the protesters really succeed? And if the regime falls, what replaces it? With me to unpack Iran's options and Israel's dilemmas are Mark Regev, former Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom, Eric Mandel, founder and director of the Middle East Political and Information Network, and Mossi Raz, a former member of the Israeli Knesset. Let's get into it. Eric, I want to start with you. The question is simple. Are we closer to the U.S. negotiating with Iran, as Vice President Vance seems to want to do, or to it taking military action? What do you think is the trigger that's going to tip us one way or the other?
So President Trump is an unconventional president, and he himself can make those decisions. And that is, I think, what is going to move here. So the tipping point, first of all, for this revolution is going to be when the people in the millions truly don't fear the security apparatus. This is a very different time than previous times, even in the Freedom Life movement a few years ago. The reason it's a different time is because economically they've never been this bad. And number two, there's a credible military threat. So what can America do here? I think the president has chosen to do something. And what he's trying to be talked out of is the kinetic options. So what are the non-kinetic options? The non-kinetic options are secondary sanctions, tariffs, and you'll have to do that against some of your friends, Turkey, UAE, India. Second choice would be their shadow oil fleet, to go after that. Covert, to disable through cyber attacks the state media and the command and control. You have overt, going after the Baji, going after the IRGC. And then you have supporting the protesters, not only Starlink, but you can ask for people to say, I'm leaving the regime. What people usually look at in my government is to see if people in the security apparatus or the army will leave, and we have not seen that yet.
So if Washington does start to negotiate while the protests are going on, do you feel, and Mark, maybe you can take this one, that is going to provide more stability to Iran, potentially save the regime? Or is that actually better, considering, I mean, we're just reading today about hundreds, if not thousands, of Iranians starting to be killed by the regime, opening fire not only on protesters but also civilians?
It's a difficult call. It's a difficult call for Israel. It's a difficult call for the United States. And it's also a difficult call for the Iranian people. I mean, this regime will massacre its people to stay in power. And until we see cracks in the regime, the hope for change in Iran is, maybe they're good hopes, but how realistic are they? I don't know. I think it's a difficult call. We saw with what Trump did in Maduro that he's willing to work with an authoritarian regime provided it doesn't go up against U.S. interests, and the vice president of Maduro is running the country and trying to make deals with, and maybe she will succeed, with the Americans. So if Trump thinks the regime now is weak, the regime is under pressure, I can get the deal on the nuclear issues that I couldn't get before, precisely because they're weak, instead of waiting and holding out for a revolution that brings in a new government, he would say from a transactional point of view, that makes a lot of sense. They didn't agree to no enrichment. Today, they're willing to agree. There'll be words in there for enforcement, right? So they break the deal, I bomb them, and they will understand that, yeah? Maybe from a Trump's perspective, and as you said, Eric said, he's an unconventional president. So from a transactional point of view, you've got leverage now. You get the deal that you wanted a few months ago. You force them to agree to no enrichment. Where does that leave Israel? Good question.
It is a big question, Mark. And Moshe, I want to turn to you. You know, you've been on the show many times and definitely pushed against military action in various, on various fronts, saying that negotiations are ultimately the way to go. In this particular case, do you agree with that? Do you think Trump should move forward with negotiations if, as Mark said, the window allows?
I must say that I don't know. There are so many things that we don't know about what happens right now in Iran. We don't know what the position of the regime. We don't know what is the situation with the protesters, how many were killed in the massacre probably that this terrible regime is doing there. And I don't know, maybe somebody does know, but I don't know what will be the reaction to an American attack on whatever. On one hand, it can unite the Iranians, like we see many times in many places. And sometimes it might weaken the regime. So I think that Trump has here something that he has to think about, and probably to hear the CIA, but hear people who understand what happens on the ground. And I don't think that the decision is easy. I think this is why he hesitates for so long. But there is one more thing that we have to say. He actually said that if the regime kills people, he is going to react. So now his word is in a question. He has to react. And maybe without his commitments, less people would have gone down to the streets and less people would have been killed. So, all those things he has to take into consideration before taking a decision, attack or not, that it's very difficult for him.
And certainly he didn't specify exactly how many people had to be killed and in what time frame. Speaking of keeping your word, Masi, let me just piggyback on that. You know, the Iranian regime threatened that if Trump does attack, that they're going to attack Israel directly. Now, I know we don't know, but based on your experience, would you think that the Iranian regime will carry out that attack if Trump does move forward with some kind of military presence in Iran?
Again, I'm sorry to say that I don't know. It's a possibility. We have to be prepared for that. We know that many times when you are in a kind of mass like they have right now in Tehran and 10 other places over in Iran, then you can unite yourself against an enemy. I'm not sure that we are still enemy for a majority of the Iranians. But maybe it can strengthen them. So it might happen, but we don't know enough. I don't know enough in order to say what's going to.
Well, and Eric, you've definitely been talking about this in terms of whether Israel could actually get pulled in directly or indirectly in some way if the U.S. takes either of these actions. Talk a little bit about what that would look like. Let's say a U.S. strike in Iran, one of the IRGC facilities where Khamenei is positioned, for example. What would happen to Israel?
So what capabilities does Iran have at this point of time after what happened in the 12-day war? They have been rebuilding their ballistic missiles, and we know what their plan was if they were left alone, if the protests didn't happen. They can send missiles here. They can activate Yemen. So Israel could be back in its bunkers again. You're already in the crosshairs. They mentioned that basically, you know, these are Zionist agitators along with the United States going along here. But what is best for Israel? What is best for the United States? I think I wrote a piece for The Hill last year that said that a regime collapse is not necessarily going to lead to a good regime change. And what usually happens after a coup or revolution is the strongest party that's left over will make the government. The strongest party here is the IRGC, which basically owns and invests and owns the economy. And they are a combination of true believers and corrupt kleptocrats. And where is this 150,000 person IRGC going to go? Where is up to 1 million Baji paramilitia going to go? Because you don't need the majority of a country if these people are going to remain brutal and are willing to kill tens of thousands. And that gets back to your original question, what is the numbers that President Trump will act upon this? And again, American troops there also that can be targeted. You thought about after Soleimani, American troops were hit, many with traumatic brain injuries after. So if I was Israel at this point, I would be on high alert. And one way or another, this is going to affect you, and whatever the aftermath is going to affect you.
So Mark, piggyback on that, because the aftermath is actually quite questionable and quite potentially scary, as Eric described, for the state of Israel. We know Khamenei, we know what the threat is. If the IRGC takes over some other leader, or even perhaps the whole society becomes fragmented and there are different leaders, 10 heads to the one headed octopus today. What would that look like for Israel, and should we be preparing, or are we preparing?
So I don't believe that you can have a worse outcome than the current outcome. I don't think Israel can face a more brutal adversary, or enemy, I should say, than the Islamic Republic of Iran. And whatever happens afterwards, I think has to be an improvement. Obviously, I'd like Iran to be a friendly country to Israel, right? In the past, under the Shah, Iran was a friend of Israel. And there's no reason why we couldn't be again. And I think as Moshe said, most Iranian people are very open to a good relation with Israel, and most people in Iran are probably open to a good relationship with the world. And it's this crazy regime that took power in 1979. If they attacked Israel, as you said, and is not impossible, I'm not sure it's probable, I think Israel will then have legitimacy to hit back hard, to hit back against regime targets. Obviously, they can hurt us, but we can hurt them much more. And I think their ability to hurt us has been limited since the 14th Day War. And I think if they start something, we can finish it much stronger. I think also if we go for regime targets, if we go for IRGC targets, if we go for, let's say, the prisons, to allow prisoners to escape and so forth, I think we could actually help the revolution there. But the tough decision really, which lies with Trump at this, I mean, if they attack us, it's no decision, no brainer. We have to respond and respond forcefully. But if the decision is still in Washington, the tough decision for President Trump is, one, do I put all my support behind the people overthrowing the regime, which would be the best outcome, yes? Or do I say the regime's probably going to survive anyway, high probability, and therefore better make the best deal I can with the existing regime, like I've done with Venezuela. And on the final point, and Moshe said this, we have to, a lot of people think we don't know, and it's about making decisions with not knowing all the facts. And I hope that when Prime Minister Netanyahu reads what his intelligence community is saying and what President Trump gets from the CIA and others, that they're making the decisions based on knowledge.
Do you believe that the protesters have a chance? You said it's a low probability that there will be a new regime. Do you believe that this protest is going to end like the previous ones and you're not going to see regime change?
So once again, I don't see the intelligence. Obviously, we'd like to see the protesters succeed. And the big advantages the protesters had, as Eric said, one, the economic situation is just so terrible in Iran. People are suffering, right? I mean, you look at the rial, their currency, it's like falling in the toilet, right? There's not energy, there's not water. There's all these day-to-day problems with people who are just suffering economically under one of the countries that should be one of the richest countries on the planet. The regime lacks legitimacy, right? In the past, maybe the Ayatollah regime had a certain amount of legitimacy with his ideology. I would argue their situation is worse than the communists when the Soviet Union fell apart. No one believes in the ideology of the regime. We see that mosques in Iran have become the targets of the protesters because they are associated with the regime. They're not seen as, people don't believe in the ideology. And finally, all autocracies, doesn't matter if they're left-wing, right-wing, religious, secular, all autocracies survive off the fear of their people. Machiavelli famously wrote, a leader can be loved or feared. It's good to be both, but if you have to choose one, choose to be feared. All autocracies need to be feared. Because of what we did in the 12-day war together with the United States, the regime was exposed as being weak. And that maybe empowers the protesters in a way we haven't seen in the past.
Now, I want to turn to a key figure here in all of this, which is Raza Pahlavi, who's been calling for the unrest. He's obviously living in the United States while trying to help to feed the fire, make the flame bigger in Iran, call the people out to the streets. Do you think that he is the right person to take over in Iran? And also, do you think it's appropriate for somebody who's sitting so many thousands of miles away, his life is not at risk while he's sitting in the United States, to be pushing these protesters out to the streets and risking their own lives?
It is not for me to decide, but we know from the history about many leaders, even in democratic states, that were pushed out because they were afraid to their life. And when the regime collapsed, they came. By the way, Khomeini is the same, but not only there. You can mention Willy Brandt in Germany and many other places. But this is for the Iranians to decide. I guess most of them would prefer somebody else, but they are so desperate about this regime that they're willing to accept him. It's way better than what they have right now. I don't think that the kind of protest that we see is because of him. I think it's because of many reasons. They fed up from this regime for many years, and then comes the economic problems and the fact that Iran has no connection to the world for years, not only now with the internet block. So there are many reasons for the Iranians to go out to protest, and I don't think that they are waiting for him to tell them where to go. Probably they know way better than him what are their problems, how Iranians look like, and probably in many of the cities that the protests took place in even never visited.
For sure, and I think that the question isn't necessarily, are they waiting for him, but the idea of, Eric, this external opposition leadership, is that putting the protests more at risk, or is it making them stronger? The narrative is often the way that the story is told. It doesn't really matter what's truth on the ground anymore in this day and age, and Reza has been able to make the headlines and appears to be as if he's leading somehow inside Iran, despite the fact that he's nowhere near what is happening. What are your thoughts about him as a potential leader in the future, and do you think that it's helping or hurting the protesters?
So I've been talking with Iranian dissidents in the external community, and they have been in disarray, and there's been quite a few who have not been in favor of being with the prince. And internally, there also is not one leader that has come up, which is something for a revolution is not necessarily a good thing. And also, Americans don't understand that half of Iran are minorities, Azeris, Kurds, Turks, Baluchs, I mean, so many different groups. But if there's one figure that we know here who could be a next Shah, if he takes the path of what the king did after the fall of Franco in Spain, and you had a figurehead who then led to a transition, which is what he says he wants to do, and enough people believe him because there are no other alternatives, then that could be a good thing. The question is going to be, no matter who is there, and even if it's him, because he will get blamed or not, is who's going to fix the economics, which is what brought the Bazaris out. Bazaris are a conservative group who actually started the '79 revolution, and they're the ones who started the protests here. So who are they going to believe? They may go back to an autocracy after that part. So is he good or not good? That's again up to, as you said, it's to the Iranian people. But he has not yet had a meeting with Trump, as far as I know. Well, by the time the show is over, we may find out. But that would give him a certain legitimacy. And I also read some Persian people from Iran who were saying that he's not who we want. We remember what the Shah did. But yet there's still, because it's so long ago that it was, there's a nostalgia that things were better when the Shah was there. And that's what they're basically emphasizing. So he has a chance to truly be a leader.
And do the people, Mark, really remember it being better? You know, I think about Gaza, for example, 20 years under Hamas rule. And most of the people living in Gaza adhere to Hamas because that's what they know. Not that they are Hamas necessarily. I'm not saying they're not civilians, but this is the way they were brought up, the school books they were trained with. Is it any different in Iran?
Apparently so, because you're seeing these protests and especially young people protesting. And it's interesting, you know, the communists ran Poland for, 40 years, and then the communist regime fell and there were no communists left in Poland. It could be the same in Iran, right? They have no popular support. They have no legitimacy. People don't believe in the ideology of the regime. And so it might not be like Gaza at all. It could be a situation that the regime falls, you see something new shoot up, something hopefully much more positive. As to the Crown Prince, it's very difficult to seriously evaluate what his level of support is. I don't know. But I do know this. If you have various opposition groups and they need someone that they can unite around, maybe they can unite around him. I mean, the truth is we saw that he said publicly on 6 o'clock in the evening, Tehran time, go out in the street and protest. And people did. It didn't mean that everyone who protested was a monarchist and supports his return. It means, though, they accept him as some sort of figure that they can unite around. And maybe your Franco example is a good one. The question is, and once again, will these protests lead to regime change? Which, of course, we all hope they do. That's the best solution for everybody, right? Or do they lead to a situation where the regime stays in power and weakened, and then Trump is saying, well, if that happens, I'm going to use it to get that nuclear deal that we've been wanting for such a long time?
Mark, what is the best outcome that we can see? Obviously, barring regime change, maybe I should ask it differently. What is the least bad outcome that we can expect when all of the dust settles?
So you're right. The best outcome is the regime falls and Iran becomes a normal country and we can have a good relationship with them and they have a good relationship with their, and that's good for the Iranian people there and so forth. The second outcome, which is better but still not good, is that somehow the regime is like maybe with Maduro. There's a change in the regime. It's still an authoritarian country, maybe still run by the extremist elements, but more pragmatic. They've agreed to some sort of deal with the Americans. They're not as aggressive. They spend, because of the crisis they went through, they spend more of their energy and their resources and their attention on internal problems in Iran and less on Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and so forth. And between those two outcomes, it's a lot of grey, yes. I would argue, yes, the weakening of the Iranian regime in itself is a plus, and the Iranian regime is going to come out of this weaker, so that's in itself a plus. If there's a chance for serious regime change, that's such a game changer. That's so important for the people of Iran, for Israel, for all the countries of the region, for the world, that Iran would have a normal government. To paraphrase Carville, who famously said in the presidential campaign of 1992, it's the economy, stupid, and Clinton won on that basis. It's the regime, stupid, right? That's the fundamental problem. There's no reason why Iran should be fighting with the world. There's no reason why Israel and Iran are enemies. It's the regime, stupid.
Eric, we're running out of time, really, in 1 minute or less. Give our viewers something to think about. What is the final sentiment that you think people should close up the show with?
So I think what the Iranian people are talking about now is long live Iran. It's not about anti-America, anti-Israel. My country, we're loath to be about in the nation-building business after Iraq and Afghanistan, but that would be a mistake. Each is different. And so the hope is that America is not just going to help precipitate a collapse and not be there to help the Iranian people going on, because it is going to be a bumpy ride.
Thank you so much. Now, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I really do want to thank our guests, Mossi, Raz, Mark, and Eric. Thank you so much for being here today. If you found this discussion valuable, please check out the ILTV podcast for a further series of in-depth interviews on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Ayan Hoffman. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground, where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel, reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect, thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
When I finish a round of Miluim and go back to civilian life, there's almost like a disconnect. It's like after the first few weeks, it feels very weird. You're looking around and you're like, no one knows that I was on a uniform yesterday. Nobody here knows. I just look like a regular guy. And then after a little while, you become disconnected from being a soldier and you really feel like a civilian. And then it feels very hard to put the uniform back on.
Welcome to The Nosh here on ILTV, and today's amazing guest is the one, the only, Shlomo Lipman, singer extraordinaire. Shlomo, thank you so much for joining me here in studio at ILTV.
Thank you for having me. It's awesome.
Shlomo, you are like the quintessential wedding singer. Whoa. Have you ever seen the movie The Wedding Singer?
I actually have not. I've seen clips on YouTube. I've seen clips on YouTube. I haven't seen the full movie yet.
How can you not? You are the wedding singer.
I know. I have to do my homework.
You got to do your homework. You got to see. Okay, so you got to see the full movie, but the clips that you have seen, and I'm sure you've seen a few that you said, and you lived the life of a wedding singer. Are any of them true? Like, what is it to be a wedding singer, especially here in Israel?
It's unbelievable. It's one of the coolest things about being a singer-songwriter or performer in general in the Jewish world. It doesn't matter how small you are as an artist or how big you get. It's always part of your scene. It's always something that you do. And I think that's something so amazing that even the biggest names are able to do something so amazing, which is to make a bride and groom, a chatan and kala, happy.
At what age were you when you decided that you're going to become a singer? Of course, going into the wedding industry as one of the premier wedding singers, but into the music industry itself. How did you decide? When did you decide? Tell me a little bit about how you got into this entire industry.
So I grew up in a very musical home. My grandmother was like the music teacher in the DC area. My dad played the drums, my mom played the flute. And when I was 3 years old, we went to my grandparents' house, and I was already old enough that I would be able to see TV and understand what that is and want to watch something. My dad was like, what is something I'm able to get my son to watch? They still had cassettes then, before DVDs.
You're aging us.
I'm 28, but I guess, the generations move fast. He bought a few Miami Boys Choir cassettes, and I started watching them, and I became absolutely obsessed. And from when I was 3 years old, that's when I knew, when I grow up, I want to be a singer.
Where did you grow up? You said in the D.C. area?
Yeah, I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland. We made Aliyah when I was 7 to Beit Shemesh, but like my entire childhood was in D.C. area.
But you said your family is musical. I thought your father was in politics and did something different.
That's true. I mean,
he's not very musical.
That's very true. He started off playing. He played the drums growing up. And
I had no idea. It's very cool.
Yeah. I'm trying to get him back on the drum set a little bit, but
I'd love to see that.
That would be awesome.
Do any of your other siblings or family members play with you, or
No. My sisters joke that I'm the one that took all the talent. It's really just I had a passion for it when I was a little kid, and I continued to work on it since I was 3 years old up until today.
How is it dealing with families here post October 7th in the wedding industry? What do you see different that you didn't have to think about before?
The biggest difference is just the connection and how meaningful. Every chuppah is so meaningful, but now, after October 7th, every chuppah has more and more layers of meaning and emotion. Every single person there knows people that are either, unfortunately, not with us or fighting on the front lines. Every single chatan has friends that are fighting, or he himself fought. Every single chuppah we do tefillah for the chayalim, which is something that didn't really exist that much before the war. It's unbelievable. The connection of all of Am Yisrael together is the biggest difference I've seen in the wedding industry.
And that connection is only getting stronger. And the connection to you and our homeland, our people, not only you a wedding singer, songwriter, you're actually a hero. Now, I'm not sure if it's Miluim you're in, or you were, or you drafted and stayed on. Talk to me a little bit about it, because I've been following your journey and seeing you, and we're going to talk about your dancing moves in uniform as well. But, your unit, Army service, talk to me about what you're doing and have been doing the past 2 years about.
Yeah, so when I was in active service back in 2017, I was in Golani, Brigade Gdud 51, Golani 51. I was a commander there. Went back to yeshiva. Started
Which
my
yeshiva
life.
were you
I
in?
was in Keren B'Yavne.
Okay,
I was
very
part
nice.
of Hesder. Yeah, part of Hesder, and then got married. Went to Kollel at Leva Torah in Beit Shemesh, and then on October 7th, I was called back up to Miluim together with hundreds of thousands of others as part of a Miluim unit of people that used to be in Golani. We were called right up to the Lebanon border. We were there that night. By October 7th night, we were already stationed on the border, ready to go. Thank God.
So talk to me.
Yeah.
October 7th, and I know you said when your parents met, you were living in Beit Shemesh with your family.
Correct.
You're married now and still live in Beit Shemesh?
Still live in Beit Shemesh, yeah. Married a girl from Beit Shemesh. That's where we're based right now.
Based in Beit Shemesh.
Yeah.
So that night you got the call, the text, whatever it was, you got to go to your unit, and you just went straight up north?
Yeah, that entire day was crazy because I was at Leva Torah, which is a Hesder yeshiva for lone soldiers. I was basically helping soldiers out, guys in active service, the entire morning, running back and forth, making sure that guys had rides to go down south. Guys had to go to Beersheba area. I almost drove down south myself a few times to bring them there. And then they told me to go tell the guys that are still in training that they were being called up. And I realized as a reservist, if guys that are still in training are being called up, my call's going to come any second.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Guys that didn't even
Guys that
finish,
didn't finish
their
their training, they said, guys, you're being called up right now.
So did they actually have a unit to go to? Were they part of a unit? How does that operate, with training?
Right. So the way training works is you get drafted into a certain unit, you do your training within that unit, and then once you finish your training, you go and you actually it's called going up to the Gdud. You go up to the actual I guess the actual unit that you were training in. So what they were doing is calling everybody up that was in training to go and basically I don't know exactly what they did that day, but my assumption is that they took over certain checkposts and stuff like that for guys that are in active service so that they're able to prepare and get ready for war. So the second they called them up, I knew my call's going to come any second. Turned on my phone. Very weird doing that on Shabbat and on Chag, but I realized that's what he had to do. And I saw that my commander said, guys, we're going to be called up any second. Get your stuff ready and be ready to go. I told my wife that it could happen any second. I told her, go to your parents. If I get called up, I'll come and I'll say goodbye. And then she went. I went back to shul, and then I checked my phone. I said, guys, it said, guys, we're being called up. Got onto uniform, drove to their house, knocked on the door, opened the door. She saw me in full uniform, and told her I'm going up to the Lebanon border. Don't know exactly what's going to happen, but this is what we have to do.
So now we have a lot of mutual friends. We know about each other. We've been friendly on social media for a while. But where I've been following you recently in the past almost 2 years is in uniform, in your unit. I guess you have some downtime, or maybe just a little bit of downtime, unless it's on break. But I've been following and seeing you singing and dancing in uniform. And talk to me. What made you do that, and the feedback you're getting from it? Because you became a star, like a rock star in uniform, singing beautiful melodies for people to hear and get inspired from.
The first few days of the war, I was in no mood to sing, no mood to post. I didn't want to post about it. I didn't feel like just picking up my phone and making a story. Hey guys, I'm by the Lebanon border. I didn't feel that was right. I said, this is what we're supposed to do. In 2-3 weeks, when all of this settles down, that's what we were thinking then. Then I'll go back to
2
it.
years
I'll post.
later.
Yeah, right. And we were stationed one day, and the way the war works in general, especially when you're not in combat but on border patrol, which is what we were doing at the start of the war, is you have time where you're actually on guard duty, but you have times that you're off. And there was in between one of my shifts, one of my guys in my unit said, Benjamin Fleischman, he asked me, he's like, Shlomo, why don't you sing a little bit? I was like, dude, I'm not in the mood to sing. Well, we'll sing later. Right now, we have something to do. We have to be focused. He's like, no, come on, let's sing. I was like, all right, fine. I started singing for them a little bit, and then I realized, I have a wedding band back home, and they're all doing Corona-styled weddings, tiny little weddings for people that their big weddings got canceled because of the situation. And I was like, they don't even know that I'm up here by the Lebanon border. Why don't I just make a video to send to them to kind of let them know, hey, what's going on? I was sitting down in a trench, and I made this video singing Mehera Mehera, a wedding song, sent it to them. My soundman put it on his story, and someone asked him, send this to me right now. That somehow got everywhere, and that was the start of this crazy, crazy thing that became Shlomo Littman, the singer soldier, the singing soldier, by the Lebanon border.
And it's just, but it's like been spiraling and spiraling. I'm seeing so many of your videos that have gone viral and shared of you just singing from your neshama, from your heart, from your soul. You're singing up there. You're protecting Israel. You literally are a hero. As you're doing that on the border, what's going through your head? What's going through your mind singing in uniform, inspiring Jews and people around the world?
It is so meaningful to me. I was thinking about it. I was talking with one of my friends a few weeks after this entire thing started, because like the next day, right after that first viral video, we were on the way back from, this is crazy, the situation we were in. They gave us our guns and we went up to guard duty without even making sure that our scopes and our barrels were aligned. It was just kind of, usually when you get a new gun, the first thing you do is you go to the shooting range, you make sure everything's working, and then you go up. But here it was, there's no time to waste. Go and figure it out on the way. After a few days, it kind of settled. We went, we shot a little bit and made sure everything was working. We're on the way back and there's a wedding happening in this yeshuv that we were stationed at up north. We're like, a wedding? No one's here. It was a chayal that decided, I am not pushing off my wedding. I was supposed to get married today. I'm going to get married today. We saw what was happening. I said,
so one second,
yeah.
His family's not around.
Family's not
the
around.
bride is not around. They all came up. How did that happen?
Yeah, they all came up. The bride is there in a bridal gown, and he's in full uniform. And they decided, we are doing this. We're not pushing off our wedding. I told them, I'm a wedding singer. If you would like, I would love to sing for you guys. They said, please, we'd love it. That video has millions of views now, and it was unbelievable for me. I was talking to a friend of mine. You know, I hadn't done anything different up by the front lines. I was the same person. I'd been working on trying to get my name out there, and thank God I had started a career beforehand. But it wasn't nothing different changed, and I thought it was such an amazing thing. You know, Akiva, one of the well-known singer Akiva, he was also called up on October 7th, and I thought to myself, you know, it was almost like God was telling me, Shlomo, I'm keeping you for a rainy day. You know, you're putting in the work now, but there's going to be a time where Am Yisrael is getting, this is at the beginning of the war. The only things on social media were all the horrible videos from what happened on October 7th. And all of a sudden, here's a faceless chayal. It wasn't a well-known name. It was just a chayal singing at a wedding of another chayal. And I think that hits a lot more than if I was a well-known name beforehand. It might have been meaningful and emotional, but the fact that it's just a chayal without a name singing for another chayal, I think that hit so much deeper. And since then, I realized, aside from actually defending Am Yisrael, and afterwards we went into Lebanon and fought there, and in Syria fought there as well, I have another mission, which is to bring hope, to bring happiness, and chizuk to Am Yisrael that needs it so much.
I want to go into in a little bit, what you've saw and what you've seen in Lebanon, Syria, but that's really where I got to know you a lot more and personally, because at that time, or a little after that time, I guess when you had a break from the Army, you came to the United States and you performed in concert in the United States. I know IMC hosted one of the events in Lawrence, New York. Right. That's where we got to meet each other, and you performed in uniform on stage. You had the whole crowd standing, singing with you. You're now an international sensation going around the world singing. How did you feel going from singing at weddings and, you know, locally and with your family and in Beit Shemesh and beyond here in Israel to, you know, headlining concerts in the USA and abroad?
It's something I always wanted to do since I was a little kid. That's all. I love being on stage, and there's something very different between performing at a wedding and performing on stage.
I was going to ask you, what's the difference in the mindset with, you know, singing at a wedding and on stage, when on stage you have a whole production team and crowd and a lot more going on than at a wedding, when if you're the wedding singer, you're more or less in charge of how the night's going to go.
Correct. It's a very different type of performing. I've happened to I've learned to fall in love with performing at weddings as well, and it's up to the point where even when Be'ezrat Hashem I'm an A-lister, I still want to be doing weddings.
You are an A-lister.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. But even when I theoretically should stop doing weddings, I want to continue doing it. There's something very special about performing at a wedding and giving over that energy to a chatan and kala. But it's a very different type of performance. It's how you use the stage, how you dance, how you present yourself. But it's something I always wanted to do, and I think it's something so amazing. You know, a lot of times this is a very interesting concept. When I finish a round of miluim and go back to civilian life, there's almost like a disconnect. It's like after the first few weeks, it feels very weird. You're looking around and you're like, no one knows that I was on a uniform yesterday. Nobody here knows. I just look like a regular guy. And then after a little while, you become disconnected from being a soldier and you really feel like a civilian, and then it feels very hard to put the uniform back on. But I've come to learn that Am Yisrael needs it. Am Yisrael really needs it. And there are times that I just want to perform like this. And my production team says, Shlomo, you don't understand, these people, especially outside of Israel, when they see you performing on uniform and in uniform, it's something so needed, that connection, seeing someone on uniform, the energy that you're able to give over and the energy you get back. And that's just how it works. You give over the energy, you get it back, you're able to give more. And that connection between Am Yisrael as a whole and Israel, and especially a soldier, is something so amazing.
But a lot of that is the energy that they're feeling, or the emotions that, the crowd is feeling. That's why you're doing it. But what is going through your mind, your soul, your body, your heart, really, when you're on stage there in your uniform and you're representing Israel, you're singing and representing the Jewish people? What is going through your head when you're on that stage looking at that crowd as they're cheering and standing for you in uniform?
Plain and simple, I feel like I'm doing what I was born to do.
What you were born to do?
100%.
It's insane. And do you get up and say, listen, I need to sing this song on stage, or I gotta, this song is more meaningful, it's gonna touch the people? How do you get your sets in line with what the crowd either anticipating or what they want?
So this is where the two worlds of concerts and weddings kind of connect and collide. We started doing, my band and I, every wedding now, we have something we call a machozet rabak. It's basically a medley of all the quote-unquote war songs.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but you got to explain it.
The Am Yisrael Chai songs. Am Yisrael Chai, Anachnu Ma'aminim B'nei Ma'aminim, Hashem Yitbarach, Al Tira Yisrael, Am Hanetzach Lo Mefached. And we basically, that's a medley that we do as part of our wedding set. And what we've done is basically brought that onto the stage. There are obviously other songs that I do. I do some of my own music. I do covers. But part of a big bulk of what we do as part of our show is we do all of these songs that we sing on the front lines, and growing up we sang, and when I was in active service before we went on long treks, or we had training exercises, we sang all these songs. And to see them now on the global stage, and all of Am Yisrael kind of feeling what a regular chayal feels before he goes into battle, is something so unbelievable.
What, at the end of the show, I've seen it myself. I've seen you speak to the crowd, take pictures, shake hands, give hugs. Any special, story or any touching moment that you could share with us that maybe someone in the crowd, or you spend a Shabbat with someone overseas during a concert, has shared with you how you've changed them or brought them something special?
That's a good question.
You had to change so many lives with what you're doing. It's just there's no other way that it can't be possible.
For sure, there's a lot of people that have. I mean, just one example from the beginning of the war. I don't know what ended up happening with this person. This is not from a show, but actually from social media and posting me singing on Madim in uniform. Somebody wrote to me that he's an EMT in New York, and he decided he wants to leave everything there, come here and start working here as an EMT. I don't know if it was in the army or to help out, but someone said, I'm leaving everything behind to go and give in Israel, and you inspired me to do that. That's something that hit me very, very deeply.
You had to inspire many people. But with that being said, I just have to backtrack a little bit and ask, with all the time that you've been spending in Miluim, and you having your own business here of wedding singers, or a wedding band, how has it affected you if you weren't able to perform at these weddings? This is your livelihood. This is how you pay your bills, support your family. If you weren't able to do that, how did you survive? How do you keep on going? Or is serving in the army and serving your country that much that you'll give it all up for?
First of all, 100%, I would give it all up for that. That's for sure. And God has a plan. He takes care of everybody. When you do the right thing, then he's going to take care of you 100%, and you're going to get exactly what you're supposed to get in life. I'm very privileged that because I'm a singer, my business isn't going anywhere, really. There are people that left employed jobs in businesses, and then or people that ran businesses, and then all of a sudden that business is not there, and then they've lost everything and given that up to be in the army. The army does make sure that you're subsidized financially for what you lost while you're away, but there are people that come back to civilian life and then their business is not there.
And they more or less have to start from scratch.
Right, have to start from scratch. I'm very privileged that because of the nature of my work, people are always going to be getting married. Especially now that I've become this singing soldier, people are still following. They know what's going on with me, and they know, oh, he's going to be back in civilian life. And so I've been very privileged. That hasn't really affected me. But there are definitely people that give it all up to make sure that they're able to watch over the Jewish world.
When you are back in reserve duty in Miluim, do you feel now that it's almost a mission that you have to put out some songs in uniform, you have to get out and on stage and sing for them, like this is what people are wanting, but not only wanting, but it gives them the chizuk to support and keep going?
There are times that it feels like I have to force to do it, because for me, at the beginning of the war, I really needed it as well. I needed to sing for people. I felt like I needed to express what I'm feeling inside and give over to the Jewish world and to the world in general. And as the time has gone on and the war has gone on, I felt that personally a little bit less. But every time I do post, I see how much other people, the world outside, people that are away from the army, because I feel it, right? You're in uniform, you're going into Lebanon, fighting there, you're going into Syria or on the border. I feel it. I'm very connected. But I feel like sometimes it's almost harder for the people not on the front lines. Sometimes we think our Chaylim have it. It's really the hardest for the families. First of all, I have a wife, I have 2 kids at home. I'm with my guys on the front lines, and I'm actively doing the work, and I feel a lot of, first of all, I feel connected, and I feel the meaning behind what I'm doing. But the families and Am Yisrael as a whole, people that are not on the front lines, I feel like they need it even way more. They need the chizuk, they need the strength a lot more than our soldiers on the front lines. So every time I push myself to, no. Am Yisrael needs this, and I get my guitar or wherever I am, and I make a video to kind of bring chizuk. It's never been about how can I use this to my advantage. Since the very beginning of the war, I didn't want to post at the beginning of the war. It just happened, right? It happened, and I realized I'm just giving over to people that need it. It's not about me. It's amazing. Hashem has his ways, and I've obviously gained.
It might not be about you, but let's make something
sure.
about you. If someone wants to contact you and hire you because they're hearing your amazing story and everything else, how can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram, Shlomo Lippman Music. That's my Instagram. If you want to find me.
That's what I follow, so I know where it is.
If you want to follow my Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, it's all Shlomo Lippman. And hey, if you have an event happening or if you have a show anywhere in the world, I want to connect with Am Yisrael. That's my mission, and I can't wait to celebrate with you.
Now that it is your mission, and you had many missions, I don't know what you can and can't talk about, but you are a soldier, a hero of the Jewish nation. You served, as you said, up on the border with Lebanon. You said Syria. I don't know how much you went into Syria, and if you knocked on a door in Damascus and said, "Hey, I'm here." But can you share some stories or anything about your service up north, what you did, and what your feelings were as you're protecting Israel and the Jewish people around the world?
100%. I'll share 2 stories that are unbelievable. The first one was, so we were first stationed by the Lebanon border, then we were stationed by the Syrian border, and then we ended up going into Lebanon and into Syria. I was stationed by the Syrian border during the first Iranian attack, and they told us, guys, phones aside, all right, listen, tonight there's a 99% chance that Iran is going to attack. Just so you know, a large member of the personnel up north are being moved down south, not because they need them down south, but because they don't want to have mass casualties. But you guys are here, so good luck. Okay, I was part of a force called Carmel Aleph, and anytime anything happens in our area, we drive right away to one of the many routes that go from deep into Syria into Israel to block off that route. And I was on the top of a mountain, on top of a little hill, when the first Iranian attack happened. It all happened right above my head. And really, that was the first time that I felt, sometimes we feel like we're part of the equation, right? I have a gun, there's a terrorist near me. I can, if I practice a lot beforehand and I'm quick, I can eliminate him before he gets to me. But here, it doesn't matter how much I shoot a ballistic missile, I'm not part of this equation at all. And I literally just started singing Vihisha Amd up there because I realized in the end of the day, it's all in God's hands. And we're just here to try to, do our part, but it's all in his hands. That's the first story. Second thing is we went into Lebanon after a year of preparing, and we talked about this while we were by the border. How is the how is the state of Israel going to handle going into Lebanon? They always told us from the very beginning of my training back in 2017, Hamas is child's play compared to Hezbollah. And that was before they had years of training in the civil war in Syria. These are trained fighters. This is going to be a crazy, crazy war. How is Israel going to be able to deal with that? Nasrallah gets killed, and we go into Lebanon, and they all ran away. We went into places that were supposed to be swarming with terrorists. We found crazy, crazy amounts of ammunition that one of my senior commanders says he thinks that if they would have infiltrated from the north, from Metula, where we ended up going in, we would have had to fight them off in Tel Aviv area. That's how crazy this was. We found go bags ready to go, motorcycles. Just give us the word. And they were going to infiltrate Israel. And we found all these, and these terrorists ran away. We went into the places that were supposed to be the most dangerous places and basically took it over without a fight. Unbelievable. The miracles that we saw in Lebanon, unbelievable.
And the crazy part is we unfortunately know a lot of stories from the First and Second Lebanon War, and it was nothing like what you experienced. Thank God you experienced what you had, and not,
Correct. Right.
Previously unfortunately what many have experienced. But for you to say that, but to see what was being planned and what they had, you had to be like, this could have been insane, and it is insane finding it afterwards, but it could have gone much worse.
It was unimaginable. It was unbelievable. We're looking around, we're like, this is crazy. There was a Shabbat afternoon that we were in Lebanon when they were bringing in people from Handasa to tear down houses. Bringing in bulldozers and the such, and we're just like chilling around. We're there to make sure that we watch over them. No one comes near, and we're just like chilling there on a Shabbat, and we're like, we're in Lebanon right now, just like hanging out on Shabbat afternoon. What? How is that? Like we all pictured what it's going to look like when we go into Lebanon and have to fight, and we're like, this is crazy. It's unbelievable. This is nothing like what we thought it was going to be, and it's all just, to me, open miracles.
It is all unbelievable and crazy. But when you say picture, you were born in America. You grew up for a short period of life in America before your family moved and made Aliyah to Israel. You wear the uniform. You protect Israel. I personally think you protect the Jewish people around the world. How do you see yourself? How do you picture yourself from someone who was brought up in America, moved to Israel, and now part of the greatest army our nation has ever had? How does that make you feel? And how do you see yourself?
Incredibly privileged. Incredibly privileged. I could have very easily just been a regular kid growing up in the States, staying in the States. I play baseball. I played in the Israel national team. I sing, obviously. I could have made a career there. I'm always very thankful to my parents that they made Aliyah back when I was 7, because I don't know what would have happened, if I stayed there for longer. I feel incredibly privileged. It is a gift. It's a mission. It's something that I wouldn't give away for the world. I'm so thankful that I get to be part of God's army.
Now, as thankful as you are, have you, in any of your travels, have you ever experienced the opposite side, any anti-Semitism or anti-Israel rhetoric?
Not really. I really haven't. I mean, I've obviously experienced it online like everybody else, but in person, not really. I've really just seen so much love, so much support. The Jewish people, the Jewish community around the world are amazing. And I think that throughout this war, the IDF went from being the Israeli army to the Jewish army.
And what's up next for Shlomo Lippman? Where are you going next? What are you doing? What's in the pipeline?
All right, so right now I am releasing singles from my upcoming album, my debut album. As of now, I'm really focused on weddings here in Israel and shows abroad. I'm going to be back in the States Hanukkah time, Be'ezrat Hashem, for another tour. We just got back from a tour in New York during August. And the second that the album is out, when the album will be out, I do not know, because every time I think I know it's going to be out, I get called for another round of Miluim, which is totally fine. It's going to be out when it's out. My goal is to make sure that it is the highest level music and that I put it together properly for the people that are going to end up listening to it. The second that it's out, I'm going to go on a tour both here in Israel and around the world.
Just a 10-second message. You as a soldier protecting, once again, Israel and everything else, what do you, because you are from America and have family, I'm sure, still in America, what is one message you have to the people in America and around the world watching Israel, watching the IDF in today's day and age?
You always have a home here in Israel. No matter what's going on around the world, we are always here to welcome you with open arms. This is your home at the end of the day. This is the home of the Jewish people. It's the future of the Jewish people. Just know that all the Chayalim, all the people in Israel, we are waiting to accept you with open arms whenever you so choose. And if you come to visit or you want to make your life here, we want to be part of that together with you. And my message for everyone around the world is that it's going to be good. Sometimes it feels like, what is going on? You know, my new single that just came out, Kama Tov, it's all about that. I wrote that by the Syrian border when that attack happened, the Iranian attack. Kama Tov holech liot po. First of all, it is so good already. We believe that God is good. It's always great. We just don't always see it. And we're going to see it really soon. It's going to be so good.
Come see in Israel. Shlomo Lippman, I want to thank you so much for joining me here.
Thank you for having me
today. You are very inspirational, besides a great singer, but very, very inspirational. Keep doing good. Your family should be very, very proud of you. All of Israel, the Jewish nation, the world is very, very proud of you. I want to thank everyone for tuning in for another amazing episode of The Nosh, exclusively on ILTV. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Israel's only English news channel, bringing you the headlines that matter every hour, straight from the center of where it's all unfolding.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We are live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the last hour. I'm Devo Klein, and here is your roundup of all of the latest developments coming out of the region. The IDF is striking in southern Lebanon. Several terror targets belonging to Hezbollah were targeted in Israeli airstrikes as the terror group continues to rebuild, rearm, and plan more attacks against Israeli civilians in northern Israel near the Lebanese border. The Lebanese army had failed to disarm Hezbollah in accordance with the U.S.-backed ceasefire signed in November 2024, an issue that prompted Washington's approval for the IDF to carry out strikes against the terrorist efforts. Prior to the strikes, the IDF Arabic spokesman released evacuation orders to villages located 300 meters from the targets. And in an unprecedented development regarding Iran, reports are now suggesting that the United States will not strike the Islamic regime. Saudi officials told European sources that Trump has backed down from the notion of striking the regime following a supposed argument from Saudi, Qatari, and Omani officials. The Arab nations, according to the reports, convinced Trump to give the Islamic Republic another chance. In addition, readiness at American bases in the area has dropped significantly as previously evacuated troops and aircraft are now being redeployed to America's largest base in Qatar. At this point, these reports are just reports, and Senator Lindsey Graham is responding quickly and refuting these claims. In a recent tweet, the senator said the reports are, quote, beyond inaccurate, emphasizing that nothing could be further from the truth. The region is on edge, and the coming days could seal its fate. And here in Israel, however, support for the people of Iran is ongoing. Last night, hundreds of Israelis gathered in Holon, the city with the largest Persian community in Israel, for a mass rally. The crowds were seen waving flags and chanting "Long live the Shah" in support of exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. The show of support comes as the people of Iran enter their 5th day with no internet in a mass blackout that regime officials said would end. While the regime promises that the killings of protesters has stopped, unrest among Iranians, particularly the families of those murdered by the regime, continues to stir. And yesterday's announcement by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff changed the game in Gaza, with the United States formally declaring the commencement of Phase 2 in President Trump's plan for Gaza. Witkoff said Phase 2 will establish a transitional Palestinian technocratic administration in Gaza, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, or NCAG. They are tasked with running the day-to-day civil affairs in the Strip. According to Witkoff, the new phase also marks the beginning of full demilitarization and reconstruction, with the primary focus on the disarmament of all unauthorized armed groups. This announcement is being praised by Qatari and Egyptian mediators, but also by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who said the Trump administration is creating new pathways toward peace. All of this unfolds as Ran Gvili, the final Israeli hostage, enters his 832nd day of captivity. Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with the family of Gvili, ensuring that the return of his body is still the top priority of his government, emphasizing that the move to phase 2 will not affect the ongoing searches for Gvili's body and the efforts to bring him home. Israeli security officials are also closely watching the new committee, confirming that the names of the NCAG are, quote, familiar to the state of Israel, each with backgrounds of working with Israeli and international bodies. Now, heading the committee will be Ali Shath, a former PA deputy minister and a senior civil servant, described by Israeli security officials as a moderate Fatah figure who has avoided militant politics. It's important to note that no authority will be exercised inside Gaza until structures, staffing, and security coordination mechanisms are defined and well in place. And that is a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. We are here every hour on the hour, bringing you all of the breaking news and all of the developments coming out of the region. Scan the QR code to download our ILTV app so you can figure out what is happening with Iran. Will the U.S. strike? Will Israel intervene? And all of the developments that you need to know. I'm Devo Klein, and thank you for watching.
I want to talk about the rise of, on one side, isolationism in the U.S., and on the other side, this Mamdaniism.
The rise of Mamdani was a reaction to Trump being elected and some of the policies that were implemented on the federal level before it was an Israel thing. When Trump got elected, he not only bring his own views into the mix. When we talk about a bipartisan system, he brought a whole spectrum of right-wing ideas along with him, with the Republican Party coming to power. There's a lot of focus on Israel by Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens because the U.S.-Israeli relationship is strong and probably as strong as it was than ever before.
We are living in a time where media and politics have become increasingly toxic and where the ability to engage in nuanced discussion feels almost non-existent. Too often, voices are silenced simply for disagreement, selective outrage replaces moral clarity, and headlines are prioritized over honest, thoughtful conversation. Activists and commentators elevate their preferred camps, and in doing so, we have become a world that stops listening to the people most affected by the decisions that are being made. Here at Off the Record, we aim to push past slogans and sound bites, welcome real debate and dialogue, and refuse to ignore voices that do not fit neatly into our preferred narratives. I'm Zina Rachamilova. Let's get into it. Over the years, we've been told that fewer Americans support Israel, that younger generations hold increasingly negative views, and that bipartisan consensus is eroding. With growing influence of voices on both the woke right and the woke left, it has become increasingly difficult to predict what this relationship will look like under the next American administration. These trends have only intensified in the wake of the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. A 2025 Quinnipiac survey found that 50% of registered voters now believe Israel is carrying out a genocide in Gaza, the highest figure recorded to date. The majority of Democrats now appear to sympathize more with Palestinians than Israelis, while younger Republicans are also reassessing their views on Israel. The reality is that both Israel and the United States have changed. What once felt like a durable bipartisan relationship no longer appears as stable, particularly as political attitudes shift in both countries and as foreign influence campaigns actively work to plant doubt about Israel among influential figures on both the left and the right. So what does this relationship look like going forward, and what forces are shaping its future? Here to discuss all of this with us today is Or Shaked. Or is the U.S. correspondent for Israel Hayom, Israel's most widely read daily newspaper. He previously served as the policy advisor at Israel's permanent mission to the United Nations and a protocol assistant at Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Early in his career, he served as a Jewish Agency Israel Fellow to Hillel at Virginia Tech. He holds a master's degree in management and public policy and a BA in international relations and business management, both from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Oh, thank you so much for being with us here today on Off the Record.
It's a pleasure being here, Zina. Thanks for having me.
So I want you to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Or Shaked. I'm 36, originally from the city of Rishon LeZion, which just happens to be where we're at right now. And if you mentioned some of my credentials, and if you had to kind of like wrap it up in one sentence, I'm a true passionate advocate for Israel and the Jewish people. That has manifested itself in a lot of my capacities over the years, and in a sense, in my professional role right now, I serve as the U.S. correspondent for Israel Hayom, which, as you mentioned, is Israel's most widely distributed newspaper, where I cover a wide array of issues that pertain to the U.S. and U.S.-Israel affairs. Of course, the war is a big one, but also domestic trends within the U.S. And how some of the social and political shifts affect the U.S.-Israeli relations as well, White House affairs and international affairs for the U.S. As well. If we're talking about, as an example, the recent interference in Venezuela and the capture of Juan Nicolas Maduro. So I really cover a wide array of issues, and I also live in the U.S. I've been living there for the past 5 years, which gives me not just a professional perspective, but also a personal one.
Amazing. So you sound like the perfect person to unpack the conversation we're trying to have today. I want to first begin by asking you about October 7th, which I think changed everything for all of us, both in Israel and Israelis and Jews in the diaspora. Can you walk us through where you were, what was happening, what was going through your mind before we get into the actual coverage of having to work and cover that war within the U.S.?
Sure. So at the time, I was still serving in my capacity as a policy advisor at Israel's permanent mission to the UN. I can go on a whole spiel on how my role significantly changed afterwards. But on the personal level, I mean, I was living with my wife on the Upper West Side at the time, a very Jewish neighborhood. We were just, doing our Simchat Torah / Shabbat dinner. And around, 11 or 11:30, we started getting some push notifications about rockets that are coming in from Gaza to southern Israel. Honestly, I didn't really think much of it. There's been a trickle of rockets every now and then for an extended period of time before that. So I kind of decided to go on my business as usual. We had a very nice time at that Shabbat dinner. We went home. I get up the day after around 6 in the morning, which would be 1 p.m. Israel time on October 7th. And I was really, jarred and shocked. My wife was as well once I woke her up to the news, trying to make sense of what was happening. I mean, in our generation, there hasn't been anything like that in that scale, not of civilian casualties. And I remember being glued to the TV along with my wife and just we were just shocked by the sheer death and destruction that we started seeing on television, and kibbutzim being captured and so forth. And I remember the broadcaster saying 100, 200, 300, 500 casualties, and it was just unbelievable, unfathomable. It was just a very awful time to be physically removed from Israel but still bearing witness to the carnage that was happening.
So I think for all of us in Israel, October 7th in itself was a terrible, terrible day for all the reasons that you just talked about. But I think for every single Jewish person outside of Israel, October 8th was equally as traumatic, because we saw the reaction of people who initially we thought, okay, at the very least, people will finally see what Hamas actually is, and they'll finally understand the real existential threat that Israel is dealing with. And instead, we saw celebrations on the streets of New York, the street that is one of the most Jewish city across the U.S., across the world, actually. And this is what people were subjected to who were living outside of Israel. So we know that these individuals who celebrated our murder were happy and were, ecstatic and advocating for Hamas and were celebrating the fact that they kidnapped hostages. But I want to ask you, what was the general sentiment you think across Americans in general? Like what we can hopefully say that this was confined to a group of individuals who already hated Israel, already hated Jews. Were Americans at large, people who you were speaking to, surprised by what was going on? Were their reactions similar to yours?
Well, at first there was, an utter shock by the wider community, at least, the people that I consider my friends and, obviously Jews, but also non-Jews. I remember getting tons of text messages kind of like conveying, a level of condolences on a national level, which again is not really something that I experienced before. But at the same time, and we can talk about October 8th. To be honest, most of the time I was, as I mentioned, really glued to the television that weekend, so I didn't really venture out at that time. But by the way, as a member of the diplomatic cohort, we were basically instructed not to leave the house and not to, and especially for an extended period of time, by the way, for 2 or 3 months, not to go to Jewish gatherings. And I remember I had my nephew's bar mitzvah that I had to politely say, hey, the Israeli security personnel does not allow me to go. And this is the type of shock and fear that many of us serving Israel at the time had to face. I can tell you that walking the streets of New York, and specifically the Upper West Side, which, as I mentioned, is a very Jewish neighborhood, was a very disturbing situation. I mean, I remember a specific case where there were a bunch of hostage signs being hung up and plastered on some walls. We went to get dinner that night, and 40 minutes later, by the time that we got back, the sign has already been ripped off. And there was a whole movie about it that recently came out. But that just goes to show that even among, the Upper West Side and places where it's predominantly the Jewish community living in, you had a lot of people that were hostile to Israel. I remember as I was walking by next to one of the streets next to my house, next to my home, there was a specific sign of it was kind of like an as a Jew kind of like situation. How do you not see the Holocaust that was happening? Which of course is a huge skewed misrepresentation of anything that had to do with our affairs in Gaza. And I just remember thinking to myself, how do you have the guts, the chutzpah to come by and have kind of like a moral superiority situation where you say, oh, I'm the minority of Jews that understand the situation very well. I mean, it was very disheartening, and it was very disappointing, to be honest. So I mean, there was a divergence of opinions both from Jews and non-Jews, and we were kind of like in that space, let alone in other spaces that are not the Upper West Side or other places that are predominantly Jewish, like Midtown East, for example, where I was working, where anti-Israel signs were plastered all over the place, protests all over the place. It just became a very different, a very hostile environment to live in.
Yeah, you talk about this stuff, and I remember this story about a month after October 7th, where this American, I was at a Shabbat dinner, and this American who had just moved to Israel a month after the war, and I was like, wow, what a time for you to move here, in the peak of such a tragic time. And he had said that when he landed, and when he made Aliyah and landed to Israel at Ben Gurion Airport, and he saw all the hostage posters, he said he was relieved. And I said, relieved? What kind of reaction is that? Relieved to see hostage posters? And he said, I was relieved that none of them were ripped. And that really broke my heart. It really broke my heart I can't imagine. I mean, I grew up outside of Israel, so I understand the experiences of a lot of diaspora Jews, but specifically after October 7th, to live in a place where hostage posters would be ripped like that. It must have been awful for so many people, which is why I think October 8th and everything that happened was its own front of the war for Jews living outside of Israel. I want to talk about the U.S.-Israel relationship, because we know that a strong U.S.-Israel relationship means a strong and safer Israel. And I want to ask you, based on your now several years of coverage for Israel Hayom, what have you seen that's changed in the last couple of years with how Americans at large are responding to Israel, responding to the war? We know that there's been a major shift in public attitude towards Israel. And so where do you see things turning to?
So we need to make a separation between two different routes as it pertains to U.S.-Israeli relations. Of course, it's no secret that the current administration is very, warm toward Israel. I mean, you saw it very concretely, and, it was very evident during the recent meeting of Prime Minister Netanyahu with President Trump, where he was kind of like bringing more and more praises toward the president toward the prime minister. Of course, it's a two-way street. There's a lot of appreciation between the two leaders and between the administration and the government as a whole. So that's what we have on the governmental level. At the same time, if you look at just ordinary Americans that were polled consistently by major polling groups in over the past couple of years, the support for Israel's cause in the war which of course contains the most noble cause of saving the remaining hostages that were there, and the one that is still there, Ron Vili, is diminishing. And not only is the support for the war diminishing, the support for Israel as a whole and its relationship with the U.S. is diminishing. A recent poll by, I believe it was Quinnipiac from late August, and a parallel one that was conducted by Harvard Harris says that 50% of people, 50% of Americans believe that Israel committed genocide in Gaza. Now, that is a very disturbing statistic. I was very alarmed personally when I heard that.
Why do you think that is? What is it is it the endless media coverage of what's happening in Gaza? Is it Israel's messaging? And in my opinion, its inability to explain its position in this war. Why do you think that there's such a major shift? Is it foreign interference? Even what is going on?
It's all of these things combined. If you look at the coverage of traditional media, and of course the ones that are considered reputable, the New York Times, MSNBC, ABC, I can go on and on listing all of the American outlets that I've been following very closely. I mean, they, have a very... To much extent, with few exceptions, I think of, for example, of Jake Tapper, that really brought the plight of the hostages on air because of his personal connection. I believe that he's Jewish. So because there was a particular sentiment there, he was able to bring a more nuanced perspective. But broadly speaking, the more the war went on, it was less and less about the hostages and more about the suffering in Gaza. And it was very a one-sided view, while using all sorts of, biased human rights report by Human Rights Watch, by Amnesty, by the UN. And don't forget that a lot of the figures that the UN presented at face value, which were then parroted by the mainstream media, were figures by Hamas, and we still don't know the numbers. There's so much dust still in the air for us to know precisely who is a combatant or not. I mean, we have our own estimations of the ratio. Even as it stands right now, the ratio is probably the best in urban warfare, or in the history of urban warfare. And don't take my word for it. John Spencer, who is the chair of urban warfare studies at West Point, says that, and many other experts. So you have the professionals that actually understand the nuances and the complexities of operating underground, and then you have the traditional media that are stating very one-sided narratives. And then, of course, social media comes into play. We recently had former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton come to our summit, our inaugural summit in New York, and she basically said what everybody knows to be true, that platforms like TikTok have skewed and biased algorithms with intent or otherwise. I guess that it's still being researched, that basically show, the suffering of Palestinians more than the suffering of Israelis. And the human reaction to it is natural. What is not natural is the algorithms that are pushing this narrative in a way that doesn't really reflect the realities on the ground. And I think that when you combine that and the traditional media's response, unfortunately, I'm very sad to say that lackluster response by Israel of people that are dedicated and skilled at appearing on social media and traditional media and representing our case. This is kind of like the results that we come to, and I assume that we're going to get to military aid eventually. 46%, according to a November poll by the Yale Youth Group, says that 46% of young people aged 18 to 29 think that Israel should stop getting military aid altogether. And young people is really at the focus here, because politicians ultimately listen to their constituents. And if these young people would retain these opinions, that this could very well be a danger to Israel and U.S.-Israeli relations in the long run.
So yeah, I actually did want to ask you this other question, which we'll get to, I guess, after, but you draw on something that I do want to talk about, which is the benefits of a U.S.-Israel relationship. I think most younger Americans are struggling to really understand what having this type of relationship with Israel really does for America, and are looking at it a little bit more as if it's a liability. So can you explain the U.S.-Israel relationship and what the U.S. specifically gets out of it that benefits them?
Sure. I mean, the military cooperation, I want to refer to it more as a cooperation rather than aid, because it's not really a handout. It's been going on for decades now, and it's something that has been a key part of the U.S.-Israeli relationship, because by having not just Israel that is surviving, but an Israel that is thriving, it also serves the U.S. interest in the region. And just to give you a few concrete examples of why that is the case, a lot of the aid that is being provided by the U.S. to Israel really benefits the development of American industries, and you have jobs that are being made as a result of the expansion of these industries. But even on the less instrumental level, when you really look at the intelligence sharing, there was a certain Air Force chief that recently stated that if the U.S. had to gather intelligence that Israel provides to the U.S., then we would need 5 CIAs. And I think that really proves the point that this is really not a one-way street. This is something that is beneficial. I know that there are countless American lives that have been saved thanks to this intelligence and thanks to our operations in the region. And it's something that young people need to better understand when we talk about this kind of dynamic.
Okay, well, do you by any chance think that Israel might be better off if it found a way to divorce itself from U.S. military aid dependency?
Well, divorce is a pretty harsh term, both in life itself and in this context, because again, we don't want to kind of say it's an all or nothing situation, because it doesn't have to be. I mean, there's a spectrum. The aid of America to Israel, went higher, as time went on, because it was a mutually benefiting dynamic. So I don't think that we should, talk in terms of, getting rid of it altogether, because that's not the reality on the ground right now, and will probably not be for the foreseeable future. That being said, we are in a situation situation where there are radical political vectors within American society, both on the left and the right, for different reasons, basically call to end that military aid. I think that we can do our best, and we should do more, as I illustrated earlier, but we don't have full control over what's happening in the U.S. socially or otherwise. There is a polarization that is happening in the U.S. that is independent of what Israel does or doesn't do. So I recently heard that Prime Minister Netanyahu unveiled a 10-year plan to strengthen the Israeli security and defense industry to be more self-sufficient. I think that could potentially provide a gradual easing of the volume of aid that is being provided by the U.S. And regardless of, we can take into account that it would change, that the status quo would retain itself, that it would be more, but first and foremost we need to make sure for our existential purposes that we don't have to rely on U.S. support in order to continue existing and thriving.
Yeah, I think for me, Israel being at the mercy of the U.S. or at the mercy of a specific administration is why I really am someone that advocates for Israel to start easing itself out of U.S. military aid dependency. Although I think sharing intelligence is something that we should always be doing because, like you said, we have the same interests. You touched upon this. I want to talk about the rise of, on one side, isolationism in the U.S. and on the other side, this Mamdaniism, if you want to call it. Based on the work that you do, how much do you think these two are really serious growing problems in the U.S.?
Sure. So naturally, I had the chance to cover both of these, trends quite a bit because they are very important to the future of U.S.-Israeli relations and how they will be defined. Mamdaniism was essentially, even in the bigger picture, the rise of Mamdani was a reaction to Trump being elected and some of the policies that were implemented on the federal level before it was an Israel thing. Mamdani made it an Israel thing because along with his socialist platform, he brought a very extremist negative sentiment toward Israel that really, brought a whole different discussion that was supposed to be about, sewage maintenance and transportation and all other municipality affairs. I think there was, if you look at the exit polls right after Mamdani was elected in November, you would see that 30% of people that voted for him really cared about the Middle East issue and the Israel-Hamas war. I can assume that the vast majority of these folks were not big fans of Israel. So there was some effect, but in the grander scheme of things, this is more of a political pendulum that swung and a reaction to Trump rather than it was for Israel. By the way, I don't necessarily think that all of the people that voted for Mamdani are anti-Israel. Some of them surely are, but I do believe that he was able to make a convincing case for the people that were voting for him that his opinions, first of all, do not make him anti-Semitic. He kind of hung around with Jews and made connections with Jews from either from the very far progressive left, which are anti-Zionist, and the most extremist ultra-Orthodox sects that are also anti-Zionist, and say, hey, look, I love Jews. I come to prayers on the high holidays, to shuls and so forth. So the people that voted for him got convinced that they'll be able to put the Israel issue on the side, or that he's not anti-Semitic, and this is the reasoning of not doing it, or they just didn't care about Israel, but the fact of the matter is he was able to make a compelling case to young people. He brought a fresh new campaign that appealed to a lot of people that are facing hardships in the city. Not everybody's rich in New York City, of course. There are many people that give all sorts of services. And he was able to get their votes, and this is how we got to the result. At the same time, you look at some of his actions in recent days, and you understand that he's really, he really, when he said that he's going to be anti-Israel, when he said that he was going to potentially arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he said that Israel is committing genocide and that Israel is an apartheid state and so forth, he says what he means and he means what he says. And what I mean by that is that already in the first day of his term in office, he issued an executive order that basically canceled executive orders that pertain to Israel and the safety of the Jewish community, including the adoption of the IRA definition for anti-Semitism, including safety of, kind of like making safe zone next to places of worships, like the unfortunate case that we saw on the Upper East Side about a month ago. And this is something that already has a detrimental effect on the safety or even the perceived safety of the Jewish community, which is also an important thing. So you have that threat from the radical left. At the same time, you can talk about isolationism. When Trump got elected, he not only bring his own views into the mix. When we talk about a bipartisan system, he brought a whole, spectrum of right-wing ideas along with him, with the Republican Party coming to power. And all of a sudden, voices that were considered marginal, voices like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that they should not do any aid to Israel. Voices like Tucker Carlson, who is a past Fox News correspondent that started his own channel and has really gained a following in the last year or so. Candace Owens, who is very openly anti-Semitic, he brought to an extent to the mainstream these kind of voices as well, inadvertently. Like, it's not like he says, "Oh, this is great that I'm going to have all of these voices." It's just a consequence of the way that this political system works, right? And the concept of isolationism, other than the purely anti-Semitic and conspiracy theory undertones that you have among these individuals, really says that America, doesn't need to do favors to anybody, and that includes, of course, Israel. In that respect, there's a lot of focus on Israel by a Tucker Carlson or a Candace Owens because the U.S.-Israeli relationship is strong and probably as strong as it was than ever before. And because of this approach, there might be a reality that if these voices become the mainstream, it's not right now. They're relatively marginal.
So you still think they're marginal?
Yes.
You still think it's marginal. Why?
Because if you look at some of the polls of the Reagan Institute, for example, you would find that these voices represent anywhere between maybe 5 to 10%.
Even though younger Republicans are feeling, there's been more of a isolationist view among younger Republicans. Is that not the case?
It is more the case with young people rather than older groups, and this is exactly why Israel needs to relieve itself from total, dependence on that military aid, which is something I alluded to and I referenced earlier. But I think with a certain gentleman by the name of J.D. Vance, who happens to be the Vice President of the United States, he has very different views about how America should conduct its world affairs, and I think that he kind of like listens very carefully to the voices of young people that want not to meddle with any world affairs. But again, like, first and foremost, and this is the logic leap that is going on here, regardless of Israel or not, America not being present in world affairs is something that is bad for America. Why? Because what happens in the Middle East, what happens in Asia, what happens in Latin America is something that ultimately affects America. So we can, if you go and say, "Oh, I'm just gonna focus on myself," what's gonna happen is that you won't confront these challenges outside of your borders. You're going to end up confronting these challenges at the border. And I think that the drug trafficking that we see from Venezuela, for example, and this is a huge conversation right now, is a pure example of what happens when you don't do something about it when it's further away from you. So isolationism is first and foremost bad for America. It would be bad for U.S.-Israeli relations. But this is really something that Israel should, pay attention to very carefully, because there might be a reality in the future where these voices by young people and by some of these extremist voices that are getting these platforms. And J.D. Vance, by the way, doesn't object to these individuals, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, getting these platforms.
And what I want to say is that he is second in command. I could agree with you here that these are still marginal voices, but the fact that someone that shares a lot of these views is second in command. And what's really noticeable was that he was not at the press conference about Venezuela. It was all the Marco Rubio show. That's the running joke on social media. So it is saying something. I do want to ask you one last question before we wrap up. We talked earlier about the reasoning why a lot of people are shifting their views on Israel. Americans, rather, are shifting their views on Israel. And we mentioned, the media, the politicians on the fringe, all of that all together. I have to ask something that I think I would need to, in the name of full transparency. One of my biggest frustrations as someone that cares about how the English-speaking world views Israel was to see politicians in our own Knesset say really stupid things that I think, may have not been the reason, for sure were not the reason why there was such a dramatic shift over this war, but definitely didn't help contribute. And I will 100% argue actually gave a lot of the people who did want to harm Israel publicly the ammunition to harm Israel publicly. Sure. And so I'm wondering, is that something that played a part? And then that leads to the next part, which I want you to answer, is what can Israelis do to tell their story better that will resonate with American audiences so that there is a understanding across the U.S. why there needs to be a strong Israel for a stronger America?
Yeah. So as it pertains to the statements made by, some ministers in our government, it's very unfortunate because, it's definitely being leveraged to and being propagated on social media to say, hey, the Minister of Finance said that, the Minister of National Security said that, and the sad reality is even though some of these folks are cabinet members, they weren't actually making any tangible effects on the way that Israel conducted its war, and it's being proven by protocols and so forth. So it's very unfortunate that from our government there are ministers that are coming out and saying all of these things that simply do not reflect the realities on the ground, we need to do better, but it has to start from there, because if we're not, and I think that sometimes there's the tendency to do that, they say, oh, if I just say it in Hebrew, it would serve my constituents and it won't be a big deal. Well, the fact of the matter is that in a globalized world, everything can be translated, soundbited and sent to millions of people in a click of a button. And we need to be very cognizant of that there are serious consequences to these kind of things, and not just on the domestic level. I think that we need to change a disc, as we say in Hebrew, as it pertains to this type of mentality, and understand that whatever it is that we do in Israel, in a globalized world, affects what's happening and the way that we are perceived around the world. It's no coincidence that Kissinger once said that Israel doesn't have a foreign policy, only domestic policy, because it brings into account that kind of mindset.
It's so true. Wow.
So there is a change in disc that needs to happen, and as it pertains to being able to really share the authentic narrative of Israelis. I mean, look, I'm not going to say anything that is out of this world. It's not a very original concept, but it's a concept that hasn't been fully implemented thus far. We need a cohort of people that are able to share Israel's story in a very authentic way, in a very eloquent way, and in terms that people from around the world can understand. I mean, we have we don't have a lack of talent. I mean, we have, of course, the Chen Mazigs and the Elon Levy's and the Emily Schraders, but these are just, you can have the best people in the world, but if it's only 5 or 10 people, then you're not going to have the bandwidth that you need in order to reach everybody. You need Israel. Israel needs to make a deliberate policy effort to train and allow people to get these platforms. And again, I don't think that there's a problem of a lack of talent. I think that there is a problem about Israel making what needs to be done budgetary-wise or strategy-wise to make sure that these people are put in these positions. I remember a certain reference by the Prime Minister from, I think it was like 6 months ago or a year ago, where he basically says that some of the ministers, in a closed meeting, he said that some of the ministers can string 2 or 3 words together in English. That's a huge problem. That's a huge problem. And this is his words, not mine. Mm-hmm. So if we are aware that there is a problem, we need to make sure that we provide a response. And the way to do that is to have authentic, eloquent, tailored voices that are able to resonate with different audiences from around the world, give them the training that they need, and put them out there in the platforms where they need to be. In the MSNBCs, in the CNNs, in the Foxes, in the New York Times, and in any other platform in the US or around the world, so that the authentic Israeli voice, not the one that the ministers that you just mentioned said, can actually be heard.
As someone that made Aliyah, to me, I heard elevate your Olim, elevate the Olim that come from different parts of the world that understand both worlds and how to communicate Israel's message. Yeah. Or I want to thank you so much. Did you want to have one final word?
Yeah, I just want to mention that historically speaking, when Israel was just becoming a country, it did exactly that with its ambassadors. I mean, it took people that came from, these respective countries, or that they're, very understanding of the type of culture that they were sent to, and they sent them there because these are the people that understand the cultural nuances and that can resonate. So I think that if we can do that on the civil society level, let alone on the governmental level, then I think that we can bring a much more impactful result in terms of how Israel is perceived, and hopefully we can maintain and grow not just the U.S.-Israeli relationship, but Israel's international relations as a whole.
Amazing. I fully agree. Thank you so much, Or Shaked, for being here. Please, everyone, make sure to follow Or's coverage with Israel Hayom, and we look forward to having you again soon.
It's been a great pleasure, Zina. Thank you for having me.
That marks the end of today's episode of Off the Record. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and we look forward to your feedback. Our goal here is to cut through the noise, challenge conventional narratives, and provide a space for honest, thoughtful conversation, because real understanding comes from asking questions others won't. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
And today we once again have the pleasure of hearing from Yael Eckstein, president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, as she brings us the latest highlights and inspiring updates from the fellowship's ongoing work.
Shalom from here in Israel, and here are 2 fellowship projects that you should know about this week. Number 1, meet Galina, an incredible Jewish woman who's 96 years old and still lives in the same small village in Ukraine that she was born and raised in. This month, the fellowship went and delivered to Galina not only a food box, but we delivered her warm clothing, blankets, medicine, everything she needs to survive the winter. Suddenly, she sits alone in her home in Ukraine, but she feels the warmth and glory of God, that everyone is connected and that we are there to care for her. Number 2, the fellowship staff recently went to Leket, which saves produce from the fields of Israel and distributes it to the poor. The fellowship partners with Leket to provide soups to the elderly during the winter that we make from these rescued vegetables, and we even provided them with a new truck. This week we went to Kiryat Shmona, which is on Israel's northernmost border. As we pulled up, the elderly, the families came, people took food to bring back to their homebound neighbors. That not only is the fellowship feeding the hungry, but we are enabling others in these most far-off, poor, war-torn cities to create community and to support each other. Well, there you have it, 2 projects out of so many of the fellowship that you are part of. Join me next week to learn more about the work of the fellowship on the ground. Shalom.
Well, thanks to Jewish National Fund USA, a record 90 college students are spending their winter break volunteering across Israel's north and south, restoring communities and strengthening their connection to Israel. Through the Alternative Winter Break program, they're supporting IDF soldiers working in agriculture and honoring fallen heroes. Joining us now from Israel are 2 of those students, Eyal Lubin and Samantha Levy. Thanks so much for being with us today. To start things off, where are you in Israel right now?
We're in Stero right now.
And why did you decide to spend your break volunteering in Israel? What did you expect the experience to be like before you arrived? We'll start with you, Samantha.
My grandparents and parents always ingrained in me the importance of volunteering in Israel and contributing to the community. So I just thought I'd give back and come on the JNF trip.
And Eyal?
Very similar. I've always been intending. I spent a year here in yeshiva on a gap year, and I've always intended on coming back and giving back to the community and being able to volunteer here as much as possible. And thankfully, through JNF, I've been able to do so.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you here. Now that you are here in Israel, how does the reality compare to what you had imagined, and how does it feel to see the impact that you're having on the country's north and south communities?
It's really, really amazing. We've started the trip. We went all the way from the north, and now we're making our way down south. And being able to see the impact that we as students have been able to make, giving back to the community, and being able to watch our impact really show its deep causes and deep roots is amazing. And we keep giving back as much as possible, and we keep receiving as much as we're giving.
Now, Samantha, how do you think this experience will influence your Zionist identity and leadership back on campus?
It's